Hello, sleepy soul. The night is quiet, the world is asleep, and something is waiting in the dark. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and write your country and current time in the comments. Now listen carefully. You ever miss a train and think it's no big deal? That was me a few years ago, and I wish I'd never shrugged it off. I want you to imagine this as I tell it, because even now, thinking about it makes my stomach turn. I wasn't someone who believed in horror stories or urban legends, but what happened that night still haunts me. My name's Liam. I was 22 at the time, living in London, finishing my degree in history at UCL. I had a small flat near King's Cross, a routine life, lectures, library, part-time at a cafe, nothing exciting. Safe, boring even. I liked it that way. The city was familiar, comforting. At least, it had been. It was mid-October, and the night was cold and drizzly. Leaves were slick on the pavement, umbrellas barely doing their job. I was late leaving the library after a study session, and by the time I got to the tube, the digital clock showed 11:58 p.m. The last train to Blackfriars had just pulled away. I cursed under my breath. Typical. I hated waiting in empty stations at night. I wandered down to the platform, kicking at a puddle. It's just one missed train, I muttered to myself, forcing a laugh. But the station was quiet. Almost too quiet. Even the usual echo of footsteps on tiles was absent. There was a stillness in the air that set my teeth on edge. I stood there, hoping the next train would come soon. Then, from the far end of the platform, a train appeared, lights dim and flickering. Weirdly, the destination screen wasn't lit. It just blinked. No station, no route. I frowned. Maybe a maintenance run. But the doors slid open anyway. It seemed like the train was inviting me. Against my better judgment, I stepped inside. And that's when I noticed the passengers. They were all seated, staring straight ahead. Not reading, not talking, just staring. Not a single blink. I remember thinking how odd it was, but chalked it up to late-night exhaustion. Maybe a theater of sorts, some students messing around. I took a seat, my jacket sticking to the damp plastic. The train lurched forward. At first, everything looked normal. The familiar tunnels blurred past, the dim lights flickering overhead. But then the train stopped at a station I'd never seen. The signs were old, peeling, names I didn't recognize: Cranford Vale, East Stone Depot, Holloway End. I shook my head, leaning closer to the window. No maps I'd ever seen showed these platforms. I told myself I was imagining it. The city's tube system was old, weird. Old disused stations existed. Maybe it was some sort of ghost line. Then the lights flickered again. Through the window, I saw a scene unfold, my own life. I froze. It was me walking home from the cafe, but something was off. My jacket was a shade too dark, my posture too rigid. I could hear a faint whisper of my own voice, calling a name I didn't recognize. A chill ran down my spine. The train moved on, and another stop. Another scene. I was in my flat this time, doors open, and someone was inside. I could see a shadow moving across the room. My heart pounded. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be. I tried to get up, walk toward the doors, but my legs felt like lead. The passengers didn't move. Didn't even glance at me. It was like they were part of the train, and the train was part of something else. At the next stop, I saw it. Someone standing on the platform, facing me. My exact height, my hair, my clothes. The face was mine, or it should have been. But the eyes empty, cold, not human. I wanted to look away, to close my eyes, but something rooted me to my seat. I whispered, this can't be real. And then the train jerked forward again. I don't remember how long it went on, stations, scenes, glimpses of futures I hoped wouldn't happen. I lost all sense of time. Each stop showed something worse, an accident, a confrontation, an argument I'd never have had in real life. But it felt inevitable. I felt trapped in a timeline I didn't belong to, a story written for someone else. Finally, we reached a platform labeled End of Line. My doppelganger was waiting there, perfectly still, my pulse in my ears, my hands trembling. My instincts screamed at me to run. I bolted. I didn't think. I ran through the carriage, ignoring the passengers who didn't react. The doors slid open onto the platform. The air smelled of dust and something metallic. The lights were dim, too dim. My reflection flickered in the darkened glass of the station walls, and for a terrifying moment, it moved independently. I ran, up the stairs, down a corridor. I had no idea where I was, only that I had to get away. Behind me a sound, a slow, deliberate clack of shoes on concrete. Not fast, not panicked, just precise. Following, matching my steps. I reached an exit. The street looked ordinary, wet, the lamplight flickering over puddles. I ran, looking back. Nothing. Just the rain, the shadows of buildings. But the feeling of being followed, didn't leave. Days later, I told friends. It was just exhaustion, they said. A dream or something. I wanted to believe that. I tried, but a month later, I saw someone on the tube, staring straight ahead, not blinking, and I caught my reflection in the window behind them. My own eyes. Empty. Cold. I stopped taking the tube at night. I moved stations. I avoid platforms after dark, but sometimes, when I'm alone, I hear the faint hum of wheels on rails. And I remember the faces, the scenes, the doppelganger waiting for me at the end of that line. People tell you London's streets are safe, that the tube is mundane. You'd think this only happens in movies. But sometimes the city shows you something else. Something you aren't supposed to see. Sometimes I wonder if the next time I miss a train, it won't be the last one I catch. And that's why I'm telling you this tonight. Not for shock, not for stories, but because maybe, just maybe, you'll listen to that little voice in your head. The one that says, don't step onto that train. Because sometimes the scariest part isn't what happens to you. It's what could happen if you just bored. And if you ever find yourself on a train with no destination, staring at passengers who don't blink, don't look too closely at the windows. You might see yourself waiting. Story 2. Have you ever looked back at one small decision and realized your whole life split in two right there? For me, it was booking a cheap room above a pub in London. I was 24 at the time, traveling alone for the first time in my life. My name is Daniel, and back then I was trying to prove something to myself, though I'm still not sure what. I had just finished university, I was between jobs, and I had saved just enough money from working nights at a grocery store to spend 3 weeks in England. Nothing about my life was dramatic. I grew up in a quiet town where the biggest event was a car alarm going off after midnight. My parents were practical people. My dad fixed boilers, my mom worked reception at a dentist's office, and both of them treated fear like something you grew out of once you paid bills. So when I landed in London, tired and excited, dragging a suitcase with one broken wheel through the wet streets, I felt strangely grown up. It was late October. The city had that damp, metallic smell after rain. Pavements shined under streetlights. Buses hissed at the curb. People walked with their collars up and their eyes down, as if the whole city was trying to get indoors before something caught up with it. I had planned badly, which was completely my fault. The hostel I originally booked had canceled my reservation because of some payment issue, and by the time I found out, most affordable places nearby were full. I stood outside King's Cross Station with my phone at 12%, searching for anything under £60 a night. That was how I found the Black Harrow. It was an old pub tucked down a narrow side street in Clerkenwell, about 20 minutes away by Underground and a short walk after that. The listing had only 5 photos. 2 of them were of the bar downstairs. One was a blurry shot of a narrow bed, and one showed a window looking out over rooftops and brick chimneys. The reviews were mixed, but not terrible. Cheap and central. Old building, but clean enough. Pub noise until closing. One review just said, "Don't stay in room 6." I remember staring at that one longer than the others. It had no explanation, no follow-up. Just that sentence. "Don't stay in room 6." You'd think that would be enough, but when you're tired, cold, alone, and trying not to spend the money you need for food, you can talk yourself out of almost anything. I told myself people were dramatic online. I booked it. The Black Harrow looked older than the street around it. It leaned slightly to one side, Or maybe that was just the way the upper windows sagged in their frames. The sign outside showed a black farm tool hanging over a field, painted in a style that looked like it hadn't been touched since the 70s. Warm light leaked from the windows, and inside I could hear low voices, glasses clinking, and an old rock song playing softly behind the bar. It should have felt comforting, and at first it did. The pub owner was a man named Graham. He was probably in his late 50s, with a heavy face, gray hair combed straight back, and hands that looked too big for the pen he used to write my name in the guest book. "Just the one night?" he asked. "3, I said. He looked up at me then. Not shocked, not angry, just still. "3? Yeah, I booked online." He stared for a second longer than normal, then nodded and turned the book around for me to sign. "Room 6, he said. There it was. I actually gave a small laugh, because I remembered the review and wanted to make it feel silly. "Is that the haunted one?" No one around us laughed. Not Graham. Not the man sitting at the bar with a newspaper. Not the woman polishing glasses near the taps. For a second, it felt like the whole pub had taken one quiet breath and decided not to let it out. Then Graham slid a brass key toward me. "Stairs are through the door at the back. Breakfast starts at 8. Don't open the fire door on the second landing. It sticks." That was all. I should mention the layout, because it still bothers me. The pub had 2 floors above it, at least from the outside. The first floor had 4 rooms, and the second floor had 2. Room 6 was at the very end of the top corridor. There was no 3rd floor. I checked without meaning to as I climbed. The staircase ended at my landing. Above it was a low ceiling with old plaster, and a small round smoke detector blinking red every few seconds. Room 6 was small, but not awful. There was a single bed with a metal frame, a wardrobe that smelled faintly of dust and lavender, a sink in the corner, a little desk, and a window facing the alley behind the pub. The carpet was dark green and worn smooth in a line from the door to the bed, like a path made by years of tired feet. The ceiling sloped slightly. I remember noticing that because it made the room feel tucked under the roof. No space above. No attic hatch. No stairs. Nothing. I dropped my suitcase, plugged in my phone, and sat on the bed. From downstairs came the muffled thump of music and voices. Normal pub sounds. Comforting sounds. I texted my mom that I was safe, sent her a photo of the room that made it look cleaner than it was, and promised I would call the next day. Then I went out. That first evening was ordinary. I walked until my legs hurt, ate a supermarket sandwich on a bench near a closed church, got lost twice, and came back around 11. The pub was busier by then. I remember a group of men laughing too loudly near the door, a woman in a red coat looking at me as I squeezed past, and Graham behind the bar watching me climb the stairs. Not in a friendly way, not in a threatening way either, just watching. I locked my door, pushed my suitcase against it because the lock felt old, and got ready for bed. I was exhausted, the kind of tired where your bones feel full of sand. I fell asleep almost instantly. Then I woke up at 3:17 a.m. I know the exact time because my phone was on the desk, face up, charging, and the screen lit when I moved. 3:17. At first, I didn't know what had woken me. The room was dark except for the streetlight pushing a pale orange stripe across the ceiling. The pub downstairs was silent. No voices, no music, just the faint hum of pipes in the walls and rain ticking against the window. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Directly above me. Slow. Heavy. Measured. One step. A pause. Another step. The sound moved from the far side of the ceiling toward the middle of the room, boards creaking under weight that should not have been there. I lay still, staring upward. My first thought was stupid. I thought maybe someone was on the roof. A worker. A drunk person. A burglar. Anything that made sense. Then the footsteps stopped above my bed. Not near the bed. Above it. I could hear the ceiling groan softly, like something was standing there. I held my breath until my chest hurt. After maybe 10 seconds, the steps continued, crossing toward the wall where the wardrobe stood. Then they faded. And that was it. I didn't sleep again properly that night. I kept telling myself old buildings make noises. Pipes knock, timber shifts, rain does weird things. I had never slept in a building that old before. Maybe it was normal. By morning, with gray light in the room and traffic starting outside, it felt less terrifying, almost embarrassing. I went downstairs around 8:30. The pub looked completely different in the morning. Chairs stacked on tables, floors sticky from the night before. Weak daylight through cloudy windows. Graham was behind the bar, counting coins into a tray. I stood there a moment before saying, "Sorry, this might sound strange, but is there access to the roof above my room?" He stopped counting. "No. Oh, I just heard someone walking around last night." His eyes moved up toward the ceiling, then back to me. "Old building. Yeah, I thought that." It just sounded like footsteps. "Old building," he repeated. There was a finality to it. A door closing. I wanted to ask more, but he looked down and went back to the coins. So I left it. That day, I did the tourist things. I went to the British Museum, took too many pictures of buildings, bought a coffee I couldn't afford, and tried to laugh at myself. I told one friend back home, through voice message, that my room might be haunted. I said it as a joke. He replied, "Bro, leave LOL." I sent back, "Can't, already paid." That second night, I did not fall asleep easily. I kept the lamp on until almost 1. I watched videos on my phone until my eyes burned. Every small sound made me pause. A car outside, a door closing somewhere below, the pipes clicking in the wall. At some point, I drifted off, and at 3:17 a.m., I woke again. This time, I woke before the footsteps started. That was worse. My eyes opened to the dark room, and for a few seconds there was nothing. Just silence. Then above me, the first board creaked. My stomach dropped. The footsteps followed the exact same path as before, from the far side of the ceiling, across the room, stop above the bed, then toward the wardrobe. But this time, when they reached that wall, I heard something else. A soft scraping sound, like furniture being dragged very slowly over wood. I sat up in bed. The sound stopped. I whispered, "Hello." I don't know why. It just came out. The room stayed still. Then, from inside the wardrobe, something tapped once. Not loud, just one dry knock from behind the doors. I stared at it until my eyes watered. The wardrobe was old and narrow, with 2 doors and a mirror fixed to the right side. I had hung my jacket inside it earlier. That was all. There wasn't enough space for a person. I knew that. I told myself it was a pipe in the wall. I told myself it was rats. I told myself everything except what my body already believed, which was that someone was in that room with me, separated from me by a few thin pieces of wood. I didn't open the wardrobe. I didn't even get out of bed. I sat there until dawn with my back against the wall, holding my phone like it could protect me. When morning finally came, I packed my things. At least, I tried to. The reasonable part of me had won. I was going downstairs, asking for a refund, and finding somewhere else even if it meant sleeping in a train station. But as I folded my clothes into the suitcase, I noticed something that made me stop. My jacket was no longer hanging inside the wardrobe. It was lying on the floor, not crumpled like it had fallen. Folded, neatly folded. On top of it was a small photograph. It was black and white, old and slightly curled at the corners. It showed the front of the black Harrow, but not as I had seen it. The street looked emptier. The cars were older. A group of people stood outside the pub, dressed in clothes from decades ago. At the upstairs window, the window of room 6, there was a pale shape. A face, maybe. It was too blurred to tell. I stared at that photo for a long time, feeling my thoughts slow down. Then someone knocked on my door. 3 gentle knocks. I almost dropped the photograph. "Who is it?" I called. No answer. I waited. Another knock came. This time lower. Not at the door. From the wardrobe. I backed away so quickly my leg hit the bed frame. The room felt smaller than it had the day before. The air seemed colder. I grabbed my suitcase and went to the door, hands shaking so badly I struggled with the key. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my hands trembling, as I fumbled for the lock. Every second felt stretched, like time itself was conspiring against me. When I finally got the door open, Graham was standing in the corridor. He was holding a stack of towels. For one strange second, neither of us spoke. Then his eyes moved past me into the room. "You shouldn't leave that open," he said. I turned. The wardrobe doors were wide open. I knew I had closed them. I know that sounds like such a small thing. A door open. A jacket moved. An old photo. None of it sounds like proof when you say it out loud. That's the worst part about fear. It becomes ridiculous in daylight. I looked back at Graham and said, "I'm leaving." He nodded once, as if he had expected it. "I can't refund the booking." "I don't care." He looked tired then. Not annoyed. Tired. "Best if you don't take anything from the room." I realized I was still holding the photograph. I looked down at it. "What is this?" His face changed. It was quick, but I saw it. Fear. Real fear. Not surprise. Not confusion. He stepped forward and held out his hand. "Give me that." "Who's in the window?" "Give it to me." His voice was quiet, but something underneath it made me obey. I handed him the photo. He took it between two fingers like it was dirty and slipped it into his back pocket. "Go downstairs," he said. I did, but I didn't leave. That's the part one still hate admitting. I had my chance. I was already out of the room. I could have walked straight into the street and never looked back. Instead, I let pride and curiosity pull me back in. When I got downstairs, the pub wasn't open yet. The front doors were locked. Graham followed me down a minute later and went behind the bar without saying anything. I asked him to let me out. He said, "Give me a moment." Then the phone behind the bar rang. He answered it, turned away, and lowered his voice. I don't know what came over me. Maybe I was angry. Maybe I wanted proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Maybe I was 24 and stupid and thought bad things only happened to other people. While Graham was on the phone, I left my suitcase by the stairs and went back up. Room 6 was exactly as I'd left it, except the wardrobe doors were closed again. The room looked ordinary, quiet, almost peaceful. The street looked ordinary, quiet, even comforting, but my gut told me something was off. I'd learned too late that danger often wears a friendly face. I stood in front of the wardrobe. For a moment, I just listened. Nothing. I opened the doors. Inside were 2 hangers, my jacket missing now because it was in my suitcase, and the back panel of the wardrobe. The wood was darker than the sides, with long vertical scratches near the bottom. I pressed my hand against it. It moved, just a little. My mouth went dry. I pushed harder, and the entire back panel shifted inward with a soft click. Behind it was blackness. Not a wall, a gap, a narrow opening, just wide enough for a person to squeeze through sideways. Cold air came out of it, carrying a smell I can still remember. Dust, old damp wood, and something stale like clothes shut away for years. I should have stopped there. I should have gone downstairs, called someone, done anything else. Instead, I turned on my phone flashlight and stepped inside. There was a staircase hidden behind the wardrobe. It was steep and narrow, with unfinished wooden steps that rose into darkness. The walls were close enough to brush both shoulders. My light shook in my hand as I climbed. Every step complained under my weight. I counted them without meaning to. 11 steps. At the top was a low door. It had no handle on my side, only a round hole where one had once been. I pushed it open. The room beyond should not have existed. It was above room 6. I knew it. I could feel the layout under my feet. But from outside, there was no 3rd floor. From inside my room, there was no attic. And yet there I was, standing in a space with a low slanted roof, dusty floorboards, and a single round window so dirty it let in almost no light. The room was full of luggage. Old suitcases stacked against the walls, trunks with leather straps, canvas bags, a child's little red case with a broken wheel. Modern backpacks too, which somehow scared me more than the old things. There were coats hanging from hooks, shoes lined neatly along one wall, passports, postcards, guidebooks, scarves, wallets, all arranged on shelves like someone had been cataloging them. and photographs, dozens of them, pinned to the beams, spread on a table, tucked into mirror frames. Every photo showed a guest, some standing outside the pub with suitcases, some sitting downstairs with drinks, some asleep in room 6. I moved closer to one without thinking. It was a photo of me, taken the night before. I was lying in bed, asleep, mouth slightly open, one arm hanging off the mattress. The angle was from above. My heart sank into my stomach as the door clicked shut behind me, and I realized I was completely alone. Someone was watching, and I had no way out. I turned toward the door. It was closed. I hadn't heard it close. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. My mind kept trying to reject what I was seeing. The photo, the room, the luggage, the hidden stairs. Then footsteps sounded below me. Not above, below. Slow steps crossing room 6. I stood frozen, staring at the floorboards. A faint line of light showed between two boards near my feet. Through it, I could see the orange glow of the lamp in my room below. Someone was in there. I crouched without meaning to and looked through the crack. At first, I saw only the floor. Then a pair of shoes stepped into view. Black shoes. Men's shoes. They stopped beside my bed. I held my breath. The person below shifted, and I saw a hand reach down and touch the pillow where my head had been. Then I heard Graham's voice from the hallway downstairs, faint and sharp. "Daniel." The shoes below turned toward the door. Not Graham, then. Someone else. Someone inside my room. Someone who had been moving above me at 3:17 every night. A sound came from behind me. A slow inhale. I turned so fast my shoulder hit a hanging coat. At the far end of the hidden room was a mirror. It was tall, older than everything else, with a dark wooden frame carved in curling patterns. The glass was cloudy and spotted, but it still reflected the room. It reflected me standing there, and behind me in the reflection stood a man. He was tall and thin, with a gray coat hanging wrong on his body. His face was partly hidden by the dark, but I could see his eyes. Calm, empty, unblinking. I spun around. No one was there. The room behind me was just luggage and dust. I looked back at the mirror. He was still there, closer now. I wanted to scream, but what came out was barely a breath. Below me, Graham shouted my name again. Then the door to room 6 slammed open. The man in the mirror tilted his head. I backed away, hit the table, and knocked photographs to the floor. My foot caught on a suitcase strap, and I nearly fell. The flashlight beam bounced wildly across the walls, showing faces in photos, open bags, names on luggage tags. MOR, Jonas P. M. Keller. A child's backpack with a plastic dinosaur keyring. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but the whisper of footsteps from the hallway made me freeze, every nerve screaming that I was not imagining this. The hidden door opened. Graham appeared in the doorway, breathing hard. Behind him, lower down on the staircase, I saw movement. The same black shoes. Someone climbing up after him. Graham looked at me, then at the mirror. His face went pale. "Don't look at it," he said. That was the first thing he said. Not, "What are you doing here?" Not, "Get out." Just, "Don't look at it." That made me look again. Of course it did. The man in the mirror was right behind me now. So close that if he had been real, I would have felt his breath on my neck. He raised one hand. In the glass, his fingers touched my shoulder. In the real room, my shoulder went ice cold. I bolted. I didn't think. I shoved past Graham, so hard he hit the wall. I started down the hidden stairs sideways, almost falling. Someone was coming up. I saw a face below me for half a second in the flashlight beam. It was not old. That detail matters. It wasn't some ancient ghost face from the photographs. It was a normal man in his 30s or 40s, with short dark hair, a trimmed beard, and a flat expression. He looked like someone you might pass on the tube without noticing. He grabbed for my ankle. His fingers brushed my jeans. I kicked out and missed, slipped, and slid down 3 steps on my hip. Pain shot through my side, but fear moved me faster than pain could stop me. I threw myself through the wardrobe opening and crashed into room 6. Graham shouted from above. The man shouted too, but not words I understood. I scrambled for the door. My suitcase was still downstairs. My passport was in my jacket pocket, inside the suitcase. My phone was in my hand, but the screen had cracked when I fell. I tried to unlock it and failed because my thumb was shaking too badly. The corridor outside room 6 seemed longer than it had before. The lights flickered once. I ran. Behind me, the wardrobe banged open. I heard steps hit the carpet. Fast now. Not slow. Not measured. Human. That was somehow worse. I hit the stairs and nearly went down face first. I caught the railing, burned my palm sliding around the turn, and kept going. On the second landing, I passed the fire door Graham had warned me about. Don't open the fire door. It sticks. The footsteps behind me were close. I grabbed the bar and pushed. It didn't move. I pushed again with everything I had. The door gave a grinding shriek and opened 2 inches, then stuck. A voice behind me said, "You shouldn't have gone up there." It wasn't Graham. I turned. The man from the stairs stood at the top of the landing. He wasn't rushing now. He didn't need to. His face was calm, almost bored. In one hand, he held my phone charger. I don't know why that detail scared me so much. Maybe because it was so ordinary. He had been in my room long enough to unplug it, long enough to touch my things, long enough to decide what I wouldn't need. I threw myself against the fire door again. It scraped open another few inches. The man started down the stairs. I screamed then. Not a clean movie scream. Something broken and ugly. "Help! Somebody help me!" From downstairs, chairs scraped. A woman shouted. The man's face changed for the first time. Annoyance. He reached me just as I squeezed through the gap in the fire door. His hand caught the back of my hoodie. The collar tightened around my throat, and for one terrible second I was stuck, half in the stairwell, half out into the alley behind the pub. I twisted, pulling so hard the fabric ripped. Then I fell backward onto wet concrete. Rain hit my face. The alley smelled like bins and beer and cold brick. I got up and ran without knowing where I was going. My socks were wet because one shoe had come off on the stairs. I could hear the fire door behind me grinding open wider. Then I was on the street, waving both arms at the first car I saw. It was a black cab. The driver braked hard and leaned out, angry at first. Then he saw my face. "Mate, what happened?" I couldn't explain. I just kept saying, "Please drive. Please. Please." He unlocked the doors. I got in, slammed it shut, and ducked down as if that would make me invisible. The man from the pub stepped out of the alley, just as the cab pulled away. He didn't run after us. He just stood there in the rain, holding my torn hoodie in one hand. Even after escaping, even with the safety of the cab's locked door around me, a small, cold part of me couldn't stop replaying the face I'd seen in the mirror. The calm, empty eyes that didn't blink. The cab driver took me to a police station. I told the story badly. I know I did. I was shaking. I was wet. I had no passport, no suitcase, one shoe, a cracked phone, and a story about a hidden room full of luggage above a pub where there was no third floor. I could hear myself sounding insane. The officers were polite, but careful. One asked if I had been drinking. I said no. Another asked if I had taken anything. I said no. They sent 2 officers to the Black Harrow while I sat under bright fluorescent lights with a paper cup of water I couldn't drink. An hour later, they came back. They had my suitcase. They had my passport. They had my shoe. They did not have the man. They said Graham told them I had panicked after hearing noises, forced open a staff storage area, and run out through the fire exit. According to him, the hidden room was just an old attic space used for storing lost property from the pub and hotel. Lost property. That was the phrase. I asked them about the photographs. They said they saw some old pictures, yes. Nothing illegal by itself. I asked about the photo of me sleeping. That one was gone. So was the mirror. So were most of the modern bags. At least, that's what they said. They asked Graham about the other man, and he claimed there had been no one else in the building except a cleaner who had already gone home. No cameras covered the back alley. The pub's interior cameras, apparently, had not been working that night. Of course, one officer, younger than the others, believed me more than he wanted to admit. I could see it in his face. He took me aside while the others were filling out forms. "Listen," he said quietly. "We've had calls about that place before." "What kind of calls?" He looked toward the front desk, then back at me. "Noise complaints. Missing property. Guests leaving in a state. Nothing that sticks." "People went missing?" He didn't answer directly. He just said, "I'd find somewhere else to stay." I laughed when he said that, but it came out wrong. I spent the rest of that night in a budget hotel near Paddington with 3 locks on the door and a chair shoved under the handle. I didn't sleep. Every time the pipes clicked, I sat up. Every footstep in the corridor made my whole body tighten. The next morning, I booked a flight home. I didn't tell my parents the full story at first. I said there had been a problem with the accommodation. My mom knew I was lying because moms always do, but she didn't push until I was back in my childhood kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of tea going cold in front of me. When I finally told them everything, my dad got angry in the way scared fathers get angry. He said we should call someone, file a complaint, contact the embassy, write reviews, get a lawyer. My mom just held my hand and asked me to describe the man again. I couldn't do it properly. That bothered me. I had seen him. I had seen his face inches from mine on the stairs. But already my memory had started to blur around him, like my mind was refusing to keep the shape. Dark hair, beard, average height, calm eyes. That was all. For months afterward, I searched online. The Black Harrow had almost no presence. A basic website, a few reviews, some old photos on travel forums. The listing disappeared 2 weeks after I left, then came back under a slightly different name. Same pub, same rooms. No mention of room 6. I found one post on an old message board from a woman who said she had stayed there in 2014. She described waking at 3:17 a.m. to footsteps above her, even though she was on the top floor. Someone replied, "Room 6." She never answered. I found another review from years earlier, written in German and badly translated by the browser. It mentioned the man in the glass. That phrase made me shut my laptop so fast I nearly cracked the screen. For a while, I tried to convince myself that it had been a scam. Some criminal thing. Hidden cameras. Guests robbed. Graham involved or scared into silence. Maybe the mirror was just my panicked brain turning a real man into something worse. Honestly, that explanation should have made me feel better. It didn't, because it still meant someone had been standing above me while I slept. It still meant someone had photographed me in bed. It still meant there was a room full of other people's belongings hidden above a cheap pub in London. And it still meant Graham knew. About 6 months later, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. My name and home address were written in block letters. Not printed. Written. Inside was the black and white photograph of the Black Harrow, the one Graham had taken from me. Only now there was something different about it. In the upstairs window, behind the pale blurred face, there was another shape. A person standing farther back in the room. It was hard to see, but I knew the outline. The hoodie, the hair, the angle of the shoulders. It was me. On the back, someone had written one line. "You left before you finished counting." I took the photo to the police. They filed it. They asked the usual questions. Had I told anyone my address? Could it be a prank? Did I have enemies? Was I sure it was the same photograph? Nothing came of it. Nothing ever comes of things like that until it's too late. Years have passed now. I'm 31. I live in a different city. I work a normal job. I have a normal flat with normal neighbors and a front door with 2 locks, a camera, and a chain. I don't stay in old pubs. I don't book cheap rooms with bad reviews. I don't sleep under sloped ceilings. And I never ignore the time if I wake in the night. Most nights, if I wake at 2:40 or 4:10, I can breathe through it. I remind myself I'm home. I remind myself there's no room above me. I remind myself London is far away. But sometimes, very rarely, my eyes open before I know why. The room will be dark. The air will feel too still. And my phone will show 3:17 a.m. That's when I lie there, completely awake, listening to the ceiling, waiting for the first footstep. Story 3. Have you ever heard someone say your name in a place where no one should know it? Not your full name shouted across a busy street. Not a friend calling from behind you. I mean whispered, softly, close to your ear. Like the person saying it has been walking beside you for a while, waiting for the exact second your guard drops. That happened to me on Tower Bridge. My name is Daniel Price. I was 27 at the time, living in Bermondsey, South London, in a one-bedroom flat that always smelled faintly of rain and old pipes. I worked nights at a small hotel near Tower Hill, mostly checking in tourists with tired faces and helping drunk businessmen figure out which room was theirs. It wasn't exciting work, but it paid enough, and at that point in my life, enough felt like a blessing. My routine was boring in the best way. I'd finish my shift a little after midnight, walk past the quiet office buildings, cut toward the river, and cross Tower Bridge on foot. Sometimes I'd stop halfway and look down at the Thames. The water always looked black at that hour, like it was moving but not really alive. Then I'd keep walking home, make toast, put on some old documentary, and fall asleep on the sofa before the kettle cooled. That was my life. Safe, predictable, small. And then the fog came. London gets fog, obviously. People love to talk about it like the whole city is still stuck in some Victorian postcard. But this fog wasn't like normal mist. It didn't drift in slowly or hang low in patches. It rolled in thick and fast, always over the bridge, always just after midnight, like someone had opened a door under the river and let it spill out. The first night I noticed it, I was tired enough that I almost didn't care. It was late October, cold enough that my hands hurt even inside my coat pockets. I remember the sound of my shoes on the pavement, the distant hum of traffic, and the little metal clinks from the bridge when the wind pushed through it. The fog covered the far end so completely that the North Tower looked like it had been cut in half. I slowed down, mostly because I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. Then I heard it. Daniel. I stopped. It was so quiet I thought it might have been the wind moving through the railings. But my body reacted before my mind did. My shoulders tightened. My mouth went dry. I looked behind me. No one. There were a couple of cars passing, headlights smeared pale yellow in the fog, but the walkway was empty. I told myself I was exhausted. When you work nights long enough, your brain starts doing weird things. Shadows move. Sounds repeat. You hear your phone buzz when it hasn't. So I kept walking. A few seconds later, I heard it again. Daniel Price. This time it was clearer. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a whisper, almost gentle. I froze so hard that a cyclist coming the other way had to swerve around me and muttered, "Watch it, mate." I turned toward him, ready to ask if he'd said my name, but he was already gone, his little red bike light swallowed by the fog. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, listening. The bridge felt wrong. That's the only way I can explain it. The city was still around me, but muted. The traffic sounded too far away. The river below sounded closer than it should have, slapping softly against stone and metal. Then another voice whispered, not my name this time. "Don't tell her about the money." It sounded like an older man. I backed away from the railing. A second voice came from somewhere ahead of me. "She knows. She saw the messages." Then a third, lower and almost amused. Mark left through the service door. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but the whisper of footsteps from deeper in the fog made me freeze, every nerve screaming that I was not imagining this. I didn't run. I wish I could say I did, but I didn't. I walked quickly, staring straight ahead, trying not to look into the white air around me. My heart was thudding so hard I could feel it in my neck. When I reached the south side and the fog thinned behind me, I actually turned around and said, "Hello." Nothing answered. By the next morning, I'd managed to convince myself it was nothing. That's what people do, I think. We explain away the first warning, because accepting it would mean changing our whole idea of what the world is. I told myself the voices were bits of conversation carried strangely by the weather. Maybe tourists. Maybe people on the other side of the road. Maybe my tired brain stitching random sounds together into words. I even told my co-worker, Priya, about it during our break the next night. She was in her 40s, sharp, funny, and impossible to impress. She listened while stirring powdered milk into her coffee, then said, "You heard your name in a fog on Tower Bridge?" "Yeah. And your first thought wasn't to stop walking that route forever?" "I thought it was probably nothing." She gave me this look over the rim of her mug. Men have a very strange relationship with survival. I laughed because it sounded ridiculous in the staff room, under fluorescent lights, next to a vending machine that stole coins. Everything scary sounds smaller when you say it out loud in a normal place. But that night, when my shift ended and I stepped outside, I didn't feel like laughing. The air was clear around the hotel. Cold, yes, but clear. I could see the lights on the river, the buses passing, people smoking outside pubs. Normal London. Then I got closer to the bridge. There it was. Fog. Thick and white, wrapped around the towers and spilling across the road like breath against glass. I stood near the entrance to the walkway, watching people disappear into it. A couple holding hands. A man in a suit talking loudly on his phone. A woman pushing a buggy with a plastic rain cover over it. They all walked in like nothing was strange. For a second, I thought maybe I was the one being dramatic. Everyone else seemed fine. So I walked. The fog swallowed the sound first. The buses faded. The traffic became a low, soft rush. Even my footsteps sounded padded, like I was walking on carpet instead of stone. Then the whispers started. Not just one or two this time. Dozens. They came from both sides of the walkway, from above, from behind me, from so close to my shoulder that I could feel cold air move against my ear. Rachel lied about the hospital. He buried the watch in the garden. Tommy never made it home. Ask Claire what happened in Leeds. I kept walking. Faster. Then one voice, a woman's voice, said, "Daniel still keeps the red envelope." I stopped dead. Because I did. The red envelope was in the bottom drawer of my bedside table. It had belonged to my mom, who died when I was 19. Inside were 3 birthday cards she had bought before she got too ill. One for my 20th, one for my 21st, and one with no age written on it. I had never told anyone about the envelope. Not Priya, not my ex, not even my sister, because something about it felt too private. The voice whispered again. He opens it when he feels lonely. My heart sank into my stomach as the fog pressed around me, and I realized I was completely alone. Someone was watching, and I had no way out. I looked around, turning in a slow circle. That was when I saw the first figure. A man was standing about 20 feet ahead of me near the railing. He wore a dark coat that went down to his knees and a flat cap pulled low over his face. At first I thought he was just some tourist dressed oddly, maybe coming from a costume party. But then another figure stepped out behind him. A woman in a long gray dress. Then a boy in a brown jacket. Then more. They were walking across the bridge through the fog, but not like normal people. They didn't look around. They didn't check phones. They didn't move out of anyone's way. They just walked slowly in the same direction, toward the middle of the bridge, their faces pale and blurred, like old photographs that had been left in water. I backed up and bumped into someone. I spun around. A young man stood behind me wearing a modern black hoodie. His face was wet from the fog, eyes wide with fear. "You hear it too?" he asked. I couldn't answer at first. He grabbed my sleeve. "You hear them, don't you?" I nodded. His lips trembled. "They said my dad's name. They said he's here." The fog shifted behind him. A whisper moved between us. "Elliot." The young man turned his head so quickly it looked painful. "Elliot, come on." He let go of me. I said, "Don't." He took one step toward the voice. "Listen to me," I said louder. "Don't follow it." But his face had changed. He looked young suddenly, like a child hearing his father come home. The voice whispered again, warmer this time. "Elliot, I've been waiting." He walked into the fog. I followed 3 steps, maybe 4, calling after him. But the fog thickened so fast I couldn't see him anymore. I heard his footsteps. Then I heard him laugh once, breathless and broken. Then nothing. I ran. I don't remember crossing the rest of the bridge. I only remember bursting out of the fog near Tooley Street with tears in my eyes and my hands shaking so badly I dropped my phone trying to unlock it. I called the police, explaining it was impossible. The operator kept asking where I was, whether anyone was injured, whether I was in immediate danger. I said a young man had walked into the fog and vanished. She asked if I'd seen him leave the bridge. I said no. She asked for a description. I gave what I could. Black hoodie, maybe early 20s, brown hair, about my height. 2 officers came about 20 minutes later. By then the fog had thinned. The bridge looked normal again, busy and lit up, with tourists taking pictures like nothing had happened. One officer, a woman with tired eyes, took my statement. The other walked around the area with a torch. "Had you been drinking tonight?" she asked. "No." "Any medication? Anything that might affect what you saw?" "No." She didn't say she didn't believe me. She didn't have to. Her face did it for her. They checked the area. They found no one. No dropped phone. No wallet. No CCTV footage they could immediately access from where I'd been standing. Before they left, the male officer said, "It may be that he went down a side street and you lost sight of him in poor visibility." I nodded because I didn't have the energy to argue, but I knew what I'd seen. The next day, I searched online for missing people near Tower Bridge. Nothing came up about Elliot. I checked local news, police appeals, social media posts. Nothing. Then I remembered something. When Elliot grabbed my sleeve, I'd noticed a small round pin on his hoodie. It had a white logo for a coffee place near London Bridge Station. I went there after work, feeling stupid the entire time. The girl behind the counter looked bored until I described him. Then she went pale. "Elliot," she said. "You know him? He works here. Can I speak to him?" She stared at me. "He didn't come in today." Her manager came over, and I repeated the description. Black hoodie, brown hair, early 20s. The manager frowned like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "We don't have an Elliot on staff," she said. The girl behind the counter turned to her. "Yes, we do." The manager shook her head. "No, we don't." The girl gave a nervous laugh. "What are you talking about?" "Elliot. Tall. Quiet. Does weekends." The manager clicked through something on the till screen, then called up the rota on a tablet. "No Elliot." The girl's smile faded. "That's not funny," she said. The manager looked annoyed now. "I'm not joking. I asked if they had staff photos. They had a board in the back, but they wouldn't let me see it." The girl went to check and came back looking like she might be sick. "He was there," she whispered. "What?" "His photo. It was there yesterday." She looked over her shoulder, lowered her voice, and said, "There's a gap now, like it was never pinned." That was the first time I understood the worst part. The fog didn't just take people. It erased proof. Over the next week, I stopped crossing Tower Bridge. I took longer routes home. Sometimes I got the bus. Sometimes I paid for a ride I couldn't afford. I avoided the river completely, which is harder in London than you'd think. It's always there somehow, between buildings, at the end of streets, shining dark under bridges. But avoiding the bridge didn't stop the whispers. The first time I heard one away from the bridge, I was in a corner shop near my flat, buying milk and cheap pasta. It was raining outside, and the glass door kept fogging up every time someone came in. I was standing by the freezer when I heard a voice behind me. "Daniel Price." I turned so fast I almost knocked over a stack of crisps. There was no one behind me. The shopkeeper looked up from his phone. "You okay?" I nodded, even though I wasn't. Then the freezer glass clouded from the inside. Not with frost, with fog. A finger, or something like a finger, traced slowly across the misted glass. Daniel. I dropped the milk and left without paying for the pasta. After that, I told Priya everything. Not the softened version. Not, "I heard weird sounds." I told her about Elliot. The coffee shop. The missing photo. The red envelope. She didn't joke this time. We were sitting in the hotel laundry room because it was the only place without guests wandering past. Machines hummed around us. Warm air smelled like detergent and damp sheets. Priya listened with her arms crossed tightly. When I finished, she said, "You need to stop going home alone. I haven't been crossing the bridge. It knows that." Hearing her say it made me feel colder than anything else. She offered to walk part of the way with me after our shifts when she could. On nights she couldn't, she made me text her when I got home. It sounds simple, but it helped. Fear is worse when it has no witness. For 3 nights, nothing happened. Then on the 4th, a guest arrived at the hotel just before midnight. He was an older man, maybe late 60s, wearing a dark wool coat and a flat cap. The same kind I'd seen in the fog. But he looked normal enough. Ruddy cheeks, wet umbrella, small suitcase. He smiled at me from the desk. "Evening, Daniel." I froze. He placed his passport on the counter. "Long night." I looked down at the booking. His name was Arthur Bell. "Have you stayed with us before?" I asked. "No." "Then how did you know my name?" He pointed at my chest. My name badge. I felt stupid, but not relieved. I checked him in with hands that didn't feel steady. While the key card machine printed, he leaned slightly closer. "Fog's bad tonight," he said. I didn't answer. He smiled. "Best to keep clear of the bridge." I looked up at him. His eyes were pale blue, watery, almost kind. "Sorry?" He took the key card from my hand. "People lose themselves in weather like that." Then he turned and walked to the lift. I watched the doors close around him. Something told me to check the room camera feeds. The hotel had cheap security monitors in the back office, mostly for insurance and angry guest complaints. I clicked through the hallways until I found the floor he was on. He stepped out of the lift on the 3rd floor. He walked past room 312, then 314, then 316. He didn't stop at his room. Instead, he turned and looked directly up at the camera. The screen flickered. For 1 second, it filled with white fog. When the image came back, the hallway was empty. I checked the booking again. Room 318. I called the room. No answer. I told the night manager, a man named Craig, that we had a guest acting strangely. Craig was the kind of person who thought every problem could be solved by saying, "Let's not make a scene." But even he agreed to come upstairs with me. Room 318 was silent. Craig knocked. "Mr. Bell?" "Hotel staff." Nothing. He used the master key and opened the door. The room was empty. Not the guest stepped out empty. Unused empty. Bed still made. Bathroom dry. Complimentary biscuits untouched. No suitcase. Craig looked at me. "Maybe you went back down." He didn't. "You don't know that." We checked the lobby camera. Arthur Bell had walked in. He had checked in. He had taken the lift. But there was no footage of him leaving. The next morning, the booking disappeared. I don't mean it was canceled. I mean it was gone. No reservation. No payment. No passport scan. No record in the system. Craig accused me of entering something wrong. Priya believed me, but that almost made it worse. Because believing me meant something impossible was getting closer. That weekend, I went to my sister's place in Croydon. Her name is Emily. She's 2 years older than me, and has always been the practical one. She has 2 kids, a husband who falls asleep in front of football, and a house that smells like crayons and laundry. I didn't tell her the whole story at first. I just said I was stressed and didn't want to be alone. She made tea and said, "Stay as long as you need." For one evening, I felt almost normal. We ate takeaway. My niece showed me a drawing of a horse that looked more like a table. My nephew asked if ghosts were real, and then immediately got bored with my answer. I slept on the sofa under a blanket too small for me, listening to the fridge hum and the family dog snore near my feet. At 3:12 a.m., I woke up because someone whispered from the hallway, "Emily knows about the red envelope." I sat up. The house was dark. The dog wasn't snoring anymore. He was standing, stiff-legged, staring at the hallway. A second whisper came. She read the card with no age. My skin went cold. That wasn't true. It couldn't be true. Then I heard my sister's bedroom door open. "Dan," she called softly. I stood, my blanket falling to the floor. "Stay in your room," I said. "What's going on?" The hallway light clicked on. Emily stood there in a dressing gown, squinting, annoyed and half asleep. Behind her, at the far end of the hall, near the stairs, fog began to curl under the front door. Not smoke. Fog. Thick. White. Slow. The dog started whining. Emily saw it and whispered, "What the hell?" Then a voice came from outside the front door. Not through the letterbox. Not muffled by wood. It sounded like it was already inside. "Daniel." Emily looked at me. This time, I saw belief land on her face like a weight. The whisper continued, "Come back to the bridge." My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone. Emily said, "I'm calling the police." But before she could, the front door handle moved. Just once. Down, then up. A small, polite test. My sister screamed for her husband. He came stumbling out in boxers, confused, holding a bedside lamp like it was a weapon. The door handle moved again. Down, up. The fog spread across the floor, crawling over the shoes by the entrance. My brother-in-law shouted, "Who's there?" The answer came in 3 voices at once. "Open the door." He reached for the lock. I grabbed his wrist so hard he cursed. "Don't." The letterbox lifted. I didn't see a hand. I saw an eye. Pale blue. Calm. Empty. It looked directly at me through the narrow opening. Even after escaping, even with the safety of the police lights behind me later that night, a small, cold part of me couldn't stop replaying the face I'd seen through the door. The calm, empty eyes that didn't blink. The police arrived 7 minutes after Emily called. By then, the fog was gone. The doorstep was dry. No footprints. No marks. Nothing on the street cameras from the neighbor's doorbell, except static during the exact few minutes it happened. My sister told them she saw the fog. Her husband told them he saw the letterbox move. The officers were polite, but you could feel them building a normal explanation because that's what they're trained to do. Prank. Missed. Faulty camera. Stress. Someone messing around. One of them asked if I had any enemies. I almost laughed. How do you explain that your enemy might be a bridge? After that, I stopped going to work. I called in sick, then kept calling. I barely slept. Every window looked like it was waiting to cloud over. Every quiet room felt occupied. I started taking pictures of everything like proof could protect me. My sister suggested I speak to someone. A doctor. A therapist. She wasn't being cruel. She was scared for me. I was scared for me too. Then Priya called. Her voice sounded wrong. "Dan," she said, "I need you to listen carefully." What happened? I found something. She was at the hotel. She had gone through old incident logs after I told her about Arthur Bell. Most were boring. Noise complaints. Lost wallets. Guests refusing to pay. But then she found printed records in a storage cabinet from before the hotel changed systems. There were notes going back years. Staff reports. Fog near Tower Bridge. Guests claiming voices called them by name. A night porter in 2009 who walked out during shift and never returned. A chambermaid in 1998 whose employee photo vanished from the staff board, but 3 co-workers insisted she had existed. And one name appeared again and again. Arthur Bell. Not as a guest. As missing. Arthur Bell had vanished in 1957, according to an old newspaper clipping someone had printed and shoved in the file. He had been a bridge maintenance worker, last seen walking into heavy fog after finishing a late repair. His wife claimed for years that he came home some nights and stood outside the door whispering. No one believed her. I asked Priya to send me photos of everything. She did. I watched the images arrive one by one. Incident report. Old clipping. Staff memo. Another clipping. Then my phone glitched. The photos disappeared from the chat. Priya sent another message. "Did you get them?" I typed. They vanished. Her reply came slowly. They vanished from my phone too. A few seconds later, she sent one final message. "Dan, there's fog in the lobby." I called her immediately. No answer. I called the hotel desk. No answer. Then I did the stupidest thing I have ever done. I went there. I know how that sounds. You'd think fear would make you smarter. It doesn't. Sometimes it makes you loyal. Sometimes it makes you reckless. Sometimes it convinces you that if you don't move right now, you'll have to live forever with the moment you didn't help. I took a cab to Tower Hill and got out 2 streets away because traffic had stopped. The whole area was smothered in fog. Not just the bridge now. The hotel, the station entrance, the pavements. Street lights turned into dull yellow circles above me. People were around, but not many. Those who were there moved quickly, heads down, like they felt the wrongness without understanding it. The hotel lobby windows glowed faintly through the fog. Inside, the lights flickered. The automatic doors didn't open when I approached. I banged on the glass. "Priya." No answer. The lobby looked empty. The chairs, the little table with tourist leaflets, the desk where I'd spent hundreds of boring nights. All of it looked normal, except for the fog gathered along the floor like water. Then the lift doors opened. Priya stepped out. For half a second, relief hit me so hard I almost cried. Then I saw the man behind her. Arthur Bell stood with one hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Priya's face was blank. Not dead, not injured, just empty, like she was listening to something far away. Arthur smiled at me. The glass doors opened. Cold air washed over my face. "Daniel," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the fog perfectly. I stepped back. "Let her go." He looked almost amused. "No one is holding her." Priya took one step forward. I said her name. She didn't react. Arthur tilted his head. "Everyone comes when they're called, sooner or later." From somewhere behind me, out in the fog, other voices began whispering. My mother's voice was one of them. I hadn't heard it in 8 years. "Dan." My knees almost gave out. It wasn't a memory. It wasn't close enough to be a dream. It was her voice exactly as it had been near the end, soft and tired and warm. "Dan, love, I'm here." I started crying before I could stop myself. Arthur watched me through the glass. "Come on," my mother whispered from the fog behind me. "I bought you one more card." That almost broke me. I turned. The fog across the street shifted, and I saw her shape. Not clearly, never clearly, but enough. A woman standing under a street lamp in the coat she used to wear to hospital appointments. Small, slightly hunched, waiting for me. I took one step toward her. Then my phone rang. The sound cut through everything. It was Emily. I answered with shaking hands. "Dan," she said. "Where are you?" I couldn't speak. "Listen to me," she said. "I found the envelope." I closed my eyes. "What?" "The red one. I found it in your drawer when I went to get some clothes for you. Dan, the last card. The one without an age." My mother's voice whispered from the fog, closer now. "Don't listen to her." Emily was crying. "The card says, keep living. Don't come looking for me." The fog seemed to pull back from me all at once. My mother's shape under the street lamp changed. It stretched. The coat sagged wrong. The head tilted too far. Arthur's smile disappeared. Priya stood in the lobby doorway, just beyond the open glass doors. Her eyes flickered, like someone waking from a deep sleep. I shouted, "Priya, run!" She blinked. Arthur turned toward her. For 1 second, his face changed too. The polite old man expression slipped away, and underneath was something thin and furious, something that looked unfinished. Priya screamed. Not a horror movie scream. A real one. Short, raw, terrified. She shoved past him and ran out through the doors. I grabbed her arm, and we ran together into the street. The fog closed around us immediately. I had no idea which direction we were going. My foot hit the curb, and I nearly went down. Priya dragged me upright. Voices whispered from every side now, hundreds of them overlapping. "Daniel, Priya, don't leave. You know what she did. You know what he kept. You know what you are." The street looked ordinary, quiet, even comforting in brief flashes when the fog thinned. But my gut told me something was off. I'd learned too late that danger often wears a friendly face. We reached the bridge without meaning to. That sounds impossible, but I swear we had been running away from it. Somehow the fog turned us around. The towers rose above us, huge and pale, their tops disappearing into white. Priya was sobbing. No, no, no. Cars were stopped on the road, engines running, headlights glowing uselessly. A bus driver stood outside his bus, staring ahead with his mouth open. On the pedestrian walkway, figures moved through the fog in old-fashioned clothes. Too many to count. Men in caps, women in long coats, children holding hands, soldiers, office workers, tourists with cameras hanging from their necks. Modern and old mixed together, all walking slowly toward the center of the bridge. And among them I saw Elliot, the young man from the coffee shop. He looked at me as he passed. His eyes were full of recognition and terror. "Help me," he mouthed. Then fog slid between us. Priya squeezed my arm hard enough to hurt. "Dan," she whispered. Arthur Bell stood at the center of the walkway. Behind him, the bridge was packed with people who should not have been there. Their clothes were damp, their faces blurred. They stood shoulder to shoulder, silent now, watching us. Arthur lifted one hand. The voices stopped. The sudden quiet was worse. He said, "Names are doors. Secrets are keys. You gave us both." I couldn't move. Priya whispered, "What does that mean?" Arthur looked at me. "You listened." That was when I understood. It wasn't that I was special. It wasn't that I had been chosen in some grand way. I had heard the whispers, and instead of leaving forever, I had kept listening. I had looked deeper, asked questions, followed proof, fed it attention. Sometimes evil doesn't need you to believe in it. Sometimes it only needs curiosity. Arthur stepped closer. The crowd moved with him. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my hands trembling, as I fumbled for my keys, though I had no idea why. Every second felt stretched, like time itself was conspiring against me. My fingers closed around the little metal torch on my keyring. A cheap one, barely worked. I clicked it on. A weak white beam cut through the fog. Arthur stopped. The light hit his face, and for the first time I saw it clearly. He wasn't old. He wasn't young. His features were layered, like many faces pressed into one. Elliot's eyes, my mother's mouth, Priya's expression, strangers I'd never met, all of them shifting under skin that didn't fit. Priya saw it too. She made a small choking sound. The torch flickered. Behind Arthur, one of the figures stepped back. Then another. Light. That was it. Not because it was holy or magic or anything like that. Maybe the fog needed darkness. Maybe it needed uncertainty. Maybe it needed the world blurred enough that it could pretend to be whatever you wanted most. I grabbed Priya's hand. "Phones," I said. "What?" "Lights." We both pulled out our phones and turned on the flashlights. Two beams cut into the fog. Arthur recoiled. The whispers returned, angry now, louder, crashing over each other. "Daniel, stop. Come back. Don't leave us." The figures on the bridge began to blur and break apart wherever the light touched them. Not vanish completely, just lose shape like reflections disturbed in water. Priya and I walked backward, lights held out in front of us. Then someone behind us shouted, "Oi, you too." A police officer came running through the fog from the south side, torch raised. Another followed, then a third. Blue lights flashed somewhere beyond them. The fog pulled away like it had been yanked. Arthur Bell stood alone for one more second in the middle of Tower Bridge. He looked straight at me. No smile now, just hatred. Then a double-decker bus rolled through the space where he'd been, and he was gone. The official report said a dense fog event caused confusion, traffic disruption, and several public distress calls around Tower Bridge and Tower Hill. Priya and I were treated for shock. A few drivers reported seeing people on the road who disappeared when approached. One bus passenger insisted she saw a crowd dressed for a funeral from another century, but that didn't make it into any report I saw. Priya quit the hotel the next week. So did I. We tried to find the old incident files again, but the storage cabinet was empty. Craig said there had never been any cabinet in that room, even though Priya and I both knew there had. I went back to the coffee shop once. The girl who remembered Elliot wasn't there. The manager said no one matching her description had ever worked there either. That was when I stopped looking. Not because I had answers, because I realized answers were part of the trap. It's been 4 years now. I don't live in London anymore. I moved north, to a quiet town where the river is narrow and shallow and crossed by a plain little footbridge no one takes pictures of. I work normal hours. I sleep with blackout curtains, a doorbell camera, and 3 torches in my bedside drawer. I don't keep old photographs on display. Not because I don't love the people in them, but because sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and find gaps where faces used to be. I still have the red envelope. The last card from my mum says exactly what Emily told me. Keep living. Don't come looking for me. I read it whenever I feel myself wanting to know more. Priya and I still talk sometimes. Not often. There's a strange guilt in surviving the same impossible thing. You become proof to each other, but also a reminder. She lives in Manchester now. She won't cross bridges on foot. I don't blame her. A few months ago, she sent me a message at 2:03 in the morning. Just one sentence. Do you ever hear them when it rains? I didn't answer until morning. Because the truth is, yes. Not often. Not clearly. But sometimes, when the weather is cold and wet and the windows fog at the edges, I hear something underneath the rain. A voice too soft to understand. A name almost forming. Once, I woke up and found my bathroom mirror clouded with steam, even though I hadn't showered. There was one word written across it. Not Daniel. Not Price. Listen. I wiped it away with a towel and sat on the bathroom floor until the sun came up. People ask me why I'm telling this now. Why put it out there if attention might be what it wants? I've thought about that a lot. Maybe this is stupid. Maybe saying it gives the fog another door. But I also think silence is how things like this survive. People vanish, records change, photos empty themselves out, and everyone left behind convinces themselves they remembered wrong. So I'm telling you what I remember, while I still can. If you're ever near Tower Bridge late at night, and fog rolls in too thick, too fast, don't stop to take a picture. Don't call out. Don't answer if something says your name. And if it tells you a secret no one else should know, walk away. Because some voices don't want to be heard. They want to be followed. Story 4. Have you ever had that feeling where you know something is behind you, but turning around feels worse than not knowing? That's the part people never understand until it happens to them. They think fear is loud. They think it's screaming, running, slamming doors. But real fear, at least the kind I felt, was quiet. It was the sound of an empty museum settling after midnight. It was the soft hum of monitors at a security desk. It was seeing something on a marble floor that absolutely should not have been there. And it was a voice, captured on a camera microphone at 3:17 in the morning, saying very calmly, "You looked at me. Now I know your face. My name is Elliot Shaw. I was 26 when this happened. At the time, I lived in a small flat in Shepherd's Bush in West London, with a kitchen window that looked straight into a brick wall and a radiator that clanked like someone tapping a spoon against a pipe. I wasn't doing anything special with my life. I'd finished college, bounced around between a few jobs, and eventually landed work in security. Nothing exciting. Office buildings, private events. Once, a hotel in Paddington where the most dramatic thing that happened was a drunk man trying to steal a fake plant from the lobby. Then I got offered nights at a museum. I'm not going to name it directly, for reasons that'll probably be obvious. But it was one of those huge old London museums that everyone knows. Tourists everywhere during the day. School trips. Gift shops selling postcards and overpriced pencils. Long stone corridors, glass cases, marble staircases, old galleries with ceilings so high your footsteps sound like they belong to someone else. When I first got the call, I actually thought it sounded perfect. Night work suited me. I liked the quiet. I liked not having to talk to people much. My shift was usually from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m., 4 nights on, 4 nights off. The pay was better than the office building jobs, and honestly, I thought it would be easy. Sit at the desk, watch cameras, walk patrols, make sure nobody broke in. Don't touch anything. That was basically the whole job. My mom wasn't thrilled about it. She kept saying, "A museum at night? No thank you." But she said it the way mums say things when they're half joking and half trying to plant a warning in your head. My mate Callum thought it was brilliant. "You'll be like that film," he said over the phone. "Things coming alive after hours." I remember laughing and saying, "If a dinosaur starts walking around, I'm quitting." I wish it had been something that simple. The first few weeks were boring in the best way. London outside could be loud, wet, and restless, but inside the museum after closing, everything felt sealed away. The cleaners left around 10. The last staff members usually cleared out by 10:30. After that, it was me and whoever else was on duty, usually one other guard, sometimes two depending on the night. The security desk was in a control room near a staff entrance. Not glamorous, just monitors, key racks, radios, a kettle, a microwave, lockers, and a chair that had seen better decades. The cameras covered the public galleries, main halls, stairwells, storage doors, delivery areas, and staff corridors. There were blind spots, of course. Old buildings always have blind spots. Too many corners, too many thick walls, too many areas where cameras couldn't be placed without ruining the look of the place. Still, it felt secure. My patrol route took about 45 minutes if I walked it properly. I'd check doors, scan points with a little device, make notes if anything looked off. At night, the museum had a different personality. During the day, it was grand. At night, it felt patient, like it was waiting for people to leave so it could breathe. Some galleries were worse than others. The Egyptian rooms had that dry old smell, like dust and stone and something faintly metallic. The Roman gallery was mostly statues and broken columns. I didn't mind that one. The natural history wing was creepy only because of the animal displays. Glass eyes looked different in low light. But the gallery I hated, even before anything happened, was the masks and ritual objects room. It wasn't huge, just a long, narrow gallery tucked between two larger exhibition spaces. Low lighting, dark walls, glass cases along both sides, masks from different cultures and time periods, all mounted at face height, staring outward. Some were painted, some were carved, some had feathers, metal, beads, or cracked leather. The labels were small and neat, written in that museum language that makes terrifying objects sound harmless. Ceremonial mask, unknown maker. Used in seasonal rites. Possibly worn during funerary observances. Most nights, I walked through there a bit faster than I needed to. Not running, just not hanging around. There was one mask in particular I always noticed. It was in a freestanding glass case, near the far end of the room. The label said it was from somewhere in North Africa, though the museum wasn't completely certain. It was old, older than almost anything else in that gallery. Dark wood, almost black, with a long narrow face and deep eye holes. No expression exactly, but somehow it looked aware. The mouth was a thin line carved slightly open, like it was about to whisper. I remember thinking, the first night I saw it, that it looked too personal. Most masks look like objects. That one looked like a face pretending to be an object. Still, I wasn't scared of it. Not then. The first strange thing happened on a Thursday in November. Cold night. Heavy rain. One of those London rains that doesn't fall so much as hang in the air and soak you slowly. I was working with a guard named Anita, who'd been there almost 10 years. She was in her 50s, calm about everything, and had the sort of dry humor that made night shifts easier. Around 1:30 a.m., I did my second patrol. When I got to the Masks Gallery, something felt off immediately. Not horror movie off, just wrong. The kind of wrong where you stop walking before you even know why. I looked around. The cases were in place. The dim gallery lights were on. Nothing was broken. No alarms. No footsteps. No open doors. Then I saw it. A small wooden stool used by museum staff was sitting in the middle of the gallery. It wasn't supposed to be there. I'd seen stools like it in staff areas and conservation rooms, but never in the public gallery. It was just placed there, neatly, facing the old black mask. I stared at it for a few seconds, waiting for my brain to give me a normal explanation. A cleaner left it there. A curator forgot it. Maybe it had been there earlier, and I just hadn't noticed. I told myself it was nothing, because that's what people do at the beginning of every story like this. You make the world normal again because you need it to be normal. I radioed Anita. Did anyone leave a stool and masks? There was a crackle, then her voice. A stool? Yeah, middle of the room. Probably cleaners. Move it to the side and log it. So I did. I remember not wanting to turn my back on the mask while I picked up the stool. That embarrassed me even though no one was there to see it. I actually laughed under my breath, like I was trying to prove something to myself. Grow up, Elliot, I muttered. The mask stared through its glass case. I moved the stool near a staff door, wrote it down, and finished my patrol. That should have been the end of it. The next night, the stool was back. Same place, same angle, facing the same mask. This time I was more annoyed than scared. I told Anita, and she frowned at the monitor like she was trying to remember something. That's odd, she said. We didn't have cleaners in that gallery tonight. We checked the cameras. Nothing. The camera covering that room showed the gallery empty from closing until I walked in. No one entered. No one moved the stool. But there it was in the footage, already sitting there at the start of the recording, even though I was certain it hadn't been there earlier. Anita shrugged, but I could tell she didn't like it. Could be a recording glitch, she said, or someone put it there before the camera rolled over. Does that happen? Everything happens in this building. That was her answer for anything strange. A door closing by itself. A motion sensor tripping in an empty corridor. A sound like coughing from a gallery nobody was in. Everything happens in this building. For the next few shifts, nothing happened. The stool stayed gone. I started feeling stupid for caring. Then came the mask. It was a Monday night, just after 2 a.m. I was on shift with a younger guard named M.O., who mostly stayed at the desk watching football clips on his phone when he thought no one noticed. I did the south route first, then the upper west galleries, then came down through masks. I reached the end of the room and stopped so hard my shoes squeaked. The black mask was not in its case. The case was still locked, glass intact, alarm inactive, but the mask was gone. For a second, my mind just refused to deal with it. I stared into the empty mount inside the case, where the mask should have been, and thought maybe I had the wrong case. Maybe it was another mask. Maybe they'd moved it during the day. Then I saw it. It was standing upright on the floor about 10 feet away, not lying flat, not fallen, standing. Someone had propped it against the base of another display case, facing the entrance to the gallery. Facing me. My heart sank into my stomach as the door clicked shut behind me, and I realized I was completely alone. Someone was watching, and I had no way out. I didn't move for several seconds. I just stood there with my torch in one hand and my radio in the other, staring at that thin carved mouth and those hollow eyes. Then I backed out of the gallery. I didn't turn around. I walked backward like a child afraid of what would happen if I looked away. When I got into the main corridor, I radioed M.O. Get Anita on the phone, I said. Now. M.O. laughed at first because he thought I was joking. Then he heard my voice properly. What happened? The mask from the case is on the floor. Silence. Then what? Just call Anita. The next hour was a mess. M.O. came down, saw it, and immediately stopped smiling. We called the night supervisor, then the museum's duty manager. Nobody wanted to touch the mask until a senior person arrived, so we sealed the gallery and watched the camera feed. Again, the footage showed nothing useful. At 11:42 p.m., the mask was in its case. At 11:43 p.m., the camera flickered for less than a second. At 11:43 and maybe 2 seconds, the mask was on the floor. No figure, no movement, no case opening, just there. The next morning, 3 people from collections came in, along with someone from security systems. They acted calm, but not relaxed. They checked the case. The lock hadn't been forced. The alarm contact hadn't triggered. The mount inside the case had a small scratch on it, like something had been lifted off quickly. One of the collection's women, a thin woman named Dr. Pritchard, looked at me in a way I didn't appreciate. Are you certain you didn't touch it? I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because I was tired and scared and offended. I wouldn't touch anything in there. Did anyone enter the gallery during your shift? No. Could you have missed someone? I was watching the cameras. She gave me that polite museum smile people use when they think you're either lying or stupid. They put the mask back in its case. Security added an extra camera angle. Maintenance checked the lock. Everyone agreed it was bizarre, but probably explainable. That word came up a lot. Explainable. The problem was nobody explained it. The following week, I started noticing little things. Nothing big enough to report without sounding unstable. A display label slightly crooked. A case light flickering only when I walked past. A faint scraping sound from inside the mask's gallery, like wood dragging gently over stone. One night, I found dust on the floor in front of the black mask's case. Not a lot, just a thin sprinkle, like something old had shed from inside. Another night, the mask was still in its case, but it was angled differently. Only slightly. The head mount allowed a tiny bit of movement, and at first I thought I was imagining it. But I had this awful feeling that it was turned more toward the security camera than before, like it had learned where it was being watched from. I told MO, and he gave me a look. Mate, you're doing too many nights. Come look at it. No, because then I'll start seeing it too. He said it as a joke, but he didn't go into that gallery unless he had to. By the end of November, I hated my patrols. I'd stand outside the mask's gallery and make myself breathe normally before going in. I'd check the time. I'd grip my torch too tightly. Then I'd walk through, eyes forward, pretending not to look at the mask while definitely looking at it. Sometimes you don't realize how quickly a place can turn against you. At first, the museum had felt quiet. Then it felt like it was listening. The audio recording happened on December 3rd. I remember the date because it was the night I seriously considered quitting. We had a new audio system being tested in certain galleries because there had been a few incidents with visitors after hours earlier that year. Nothing dramatic, just people hiding until closing as a prank or for social media. So some cameras had audio enabled overnight for trial purposes. At 3:17 a.m., motion detection flagged the mask's gallery. There was no motion on video. The room looked empty. The mask was in its case. Everything still. But the system had recorded audio. I was at the desk alone because MO was doing the East Wing. A notification popped on the screen, and I clicked it without thinking. At first, there was just static. Then a low sound. Breathing, maybe. I turned the volume up. That's when I heard it. A voice very close to the microphone, dry and soft, almost amused. You looked at me. There was a pause. Then, now I know your face. I ripped the headphones off so fast they hit the desk. For a few seconds, I just sat there, staring at the monitors. My skin went cold in a way I still remember. Not goosebumps. Colder than that. Like something inside me had stepped backward. MO came in maybe 5 minutes later and found me standing in the corner of the control room with my radio in my hand. What's wrong with you? I played it for him. He listened once, then took the headphones off slowly. That's someone messing about, he said. Who? I don't know. How would they be in the gallery? He looked at the monitors. His face had changed. The joking version of him was gone. Play it again. I didn't want to, but I did. We sent it to the supervisor. By morning, the entire security department had heard it. Half of them thought it was a prank. The other half didn't say what they thought. The official line was that it might have been radio interference, an audio artifact, or someone near another microphone feeding into the wrong channel. That sounded reasonable until the system technician came in and said, "No, it came from that camera." After that, nobody really joked about the mask anymore. There was an investigation, but a quiet one. Museums hate panic. They hate anything that might turn into a headline or a social media post. So nobody used words like haunted or cursed. They used words like breach, vulnerability, procedural failure. They reviewed access logs. They checked staff cards. They inspected service corridors and old maintenance doors. They looked at footage from nearby galleries. Nothing obvious turned up, but Dr. Pritchard did tell me something that stuck with me. She came to the control room one morning after my shift, holding a folder against her chest. She looked tired. "That particular object," she said carefully, "has been associated with incidents before." I waited for her to smile or explain that she meant insurance issues. She didn't. "What kind of incidents?" She looked toward the open door, then lowered her voice. "It was removed from display in the late 90s after a visitor damaged the case trying to get to it. A few years later, a technician refused to work in that room because he believed someone was following him home." "Following him?" "That's what he said." "Who?" She pressed her lips together. "He said he didn't know. He said it had no face." I remember just staring at her. Then she seemed to realize how that sounded and shook her head. "People say strange things when they're stressed." I shouldn't have mentioned it, but she had mentioned it. And once someone puts that kind of thought in your head, you can't unthink it. The next few nights were quiet again. Too quiet, really. Nothing moved. No voices. No alarms. I started to calm down. That's how these things get you, I think. Not by escalating constantly, but by backing off long enough for you to feel foolish. By mid-December, London had turned properly cold. Dark by 4. Pavements slick with rain. Christmas lights hanging over the streets, making everything look warmer than it was. I'd come into work with a coffee from the same place near the station, nod to the front of house staff leaving for the night, then settle into the routine. Keys, radio, cameras, patrol. Try not to think about the mask. One night, I was leaving after my shift just after 6 a.m. The sky was still black, but there was that gray pressure behind it that meant morning was coming. I walked out through the staff entrance into the service lane behind the museum. A man was standing across the lane. He was under a street lamp, wearing a dark coat and a flat cap. Older, maybe late 50s. Thin. He had one of those forgettable faces you'd pass on the tube and never remember. Except he was staring straight at me. At first, I thought he might be a contractor waiting for access. People came early sometimes. Deliveries, maintenance, cleaners. "You all right?" I called. He didn't answer. He just kept looking at me. The street looked ordinary, quiet, even comforting, but my gut told me something was off. I'd learned too late that danger often wears a friendly face. I walked away toward the main road, telling myself not to be dramatic. When I looked back, he was gone. That should have been nothing. But the next morning, he was there again. Same place, same coat, same cap. This time he smiled. Not a big smile, just enough to show he recognized me. I didn't say anything. I walked faster. By the third morning, I took a different exit. He was waiting near that one too. That was when the fear changed shape. Until then, it had been contained inside the museum. Strange things in galleries. Bad audio. A creepy object behind glass. Now it had followed me outside. I told Anita when she came in later that week. She listened without interrupting, which made it worse somehow. "Could be press," she said. "Could be someone watching staff routines." "Why me?" "Maybe because you're new. Maybe because you noticed something." I hated that answer. She told me to vary my route home, avoid wearing my security badge outside, and report it formally. I did. The report went nowhere because the man hadn't threatened me. There was no photo, no name, no direct contact. Just a person standing on a public street. The first note appeared in my locker 2 nights later. It was folded once, tucked into the sleeve of my jacket. No envelope. Just a small piece of paper with 4 words written in black ink. "I know your face." I didn't tell myself it was nothing that time. I took it straight to the supervisor, a man named Graham who had been in security since before I was born. Graham was practical, broad-shouldered, and not easily impressed. He looked at the note, then at me. "Who has access to your locker?" "Staff." "Locker room camera?" "Corridor only." He sighed through his nose. Could be internal. That thought was almost worse. For the next hour, I sat in the control room watching every staff corridor camera from the previous few hours, trying to spot someone going into the locker room. People came and went. Cleaners, guards, 2 maintenance guys, a woman from archives. Nothing stood out. The note was bagged, logged, and passed to management. I called my mum that morning from the bus because I suddenly didn't want to be alone with my own thoughts. I try to keep my voice normal, but mums hear things. What's happened? Nothing. Just a weird situation at work. What situation? I told her some of it. Not the voice. Not the mask moving. Just that someone might be messing with me. She went quiet, then said, "Leave." I can't just leave. Yes, you can. Jobs are jobs. I remember looking out the bus window at people walking to work, carrying coffees, wearing scarves, checking their phones. Everyone looked so normal it made me angry. I need the money. There are other jobs. She was right, of course. But fear makes you stubborn in strange ways. Part of me didn't want to be chased out by a prank. Part of me wanted proof. Part of me thought quitting would mean admitting something impossible was happening. So I stayed. The worst week began on a Sunday. I arrived early because trains had been a mess, and I didn't want to be late. The museum was still open, packed with visitors. Families, tourists, kids dragging parents toward the dinosaur section. I stood near the staff door with my coffee, waiting for the day guards to finish handover. That's when I saw the man in the flat cap. He was inside the museum, standing at the entrance to the masks gallery. He wasn't looking at the displays. He was looking at me. There were people everywhere between us. A school group, a couple with a pram, a guide explaining something to a cluster of tourists. But he didn't blend in anymore. He lifted one hand slightly like a little greeting. Then he turned and walked into the gallery. I followed. I shouldn't have, but I did. By the time I reached the gallery, he was gone. There were only visitors moving slowly past the cases. The black mask sat behind its glass like it always did. Only now, there was something taped to the outside of the case. A photograph. At first, I thought it was part of an exhibit label that had come loose. Then I got closer and saw what it was. It was a photo of me, taken from outside my flat. I knew because I could see my kitchen window in the background, the ugly brick wall, the half-dead basil plant on the sill, me standing there in a t-shirt, holding a mug, completely unaware. For a second I couldn't hear anything. The gallery went muffled. People moved around me like they were underwater. I pulled the photo off the glass and walked straight to Graham's office. That was the first time police were called. 2 officers came, took a statement, looked at the photo, and asked the questions you'd expect. Did I have enemies? Any ex-partners? Any disputes? Could it be a friend playing a prank? Did I post my address online? Did I live alone? I answered everything. Yes, I lived alone. No, I didn't have enemies. No, I didn't think it was funny. They were kind, but I could tell they were limited. A creepy photo and a note were serious, but not enough to launch some massive investigation. They advised me to improve home security, keep records, change routes, tell neighbors, and call immediately if I saw the man again. One officer, a woman named Singh, pulled me aside before leaving. "Don't ignore your instincts," she said. "People try to rationalize this kind of thing because they don't want to feel frightened. But if you feel watched, act as if you are." I appreciated that more than she probably knew. That night at work, Graham doubled patrols and told me to stay mostly at the desk. Anita came in on her night off for part of the evening because she'd heard what happened. She brought me tea and didn't make a big thing of it. Around midnight, she sat beside me watching the monitors. "You should take leave," she said. "I know, but you won't." I looked at her. She shrugged. "You've got that look, like you think you can solve it by staring hard enough." I almost smiled. "I just want to know who it is." "No, you want it to make sense. That's different." She was right. At 2:12 a.m., the camera in the masks gallery went black. Only one camera. The new one. Then the second camera froze. The rest of the museum feeds stayed normal. Graham was downstairs doing a perimeter check. Emma was off sick. Anita had left at 1. I was alone in the control room. I radioed Graham. "Cameras down in masks." His reply came with static. "Say again?" "Masks cameras are down." More static. Then his voice. "Stay at the desk. I'm coming back." I watched the frozen images on the monitors. The gallery was empty in both. The mask in its case. Then audio activated. No movement. No picture, just audio. At first, I heard a soft tapping. Tap, 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 like fingernails on glass. I felt every muscle in my body tighten. Then the voice came through. Not loud, not dramatic. Close. Elliot. I stood so fast the chair rolled backward and hit the wall. Nobody at work called me Elliot over the radio. They called me Shaw. The voice said my name again. Elliot. I grabbed the radio. Graham, get back now. Static. Then, from the speaker, you shouldn't have shown them. My mouth went dry. The control room suddenly felt too small, too bright, too exposed. I looked at the door. It was shut, but not locked. The corridor outside was empty on the camera. I told myself someone had hacked the audio. Someone had gotten into the system. Someone was in a maintenance room. Someone was using a radio. Every explanation was bad. Then all the monitors flickered once. When the camera feed returned, the mask's gallery was visible again. The glass case was open. The mask was gone. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but the whisper of footsteps from the hallway made me freeze, every nerve screaming that I was not imagining this. I looked at the corridor camera. Nothing, but I could hear footsteps. Not through the speakers. Outside the control room. Slow steps. Leather soles on hard floor. I backed away from the door, holding the radio so tight my fingers hurt. Graham, I whispered stupidly, as if whispering would help. Graham, someone's here. No answer. The footsteps stopped right outside. I stared at the handle. It moved. Just slightly. Down a fraction. Then back up. I forgot how to breathe. The handle lowered again, slower this time. The door wasn't locked. I don't know why I hadn't locked it. Maybe because that control room had always felt like the safest place in the building. Maybe because you don't lock doors against things you don't believe can reach you. My hand shook so badly, I nearly dropped the radio. Then a voice from the other side of the door said, "You looked at me." It wasn't coming from the speaker now. It was right there, a few feet away. Human. Real. I slammed my palm against the lock button beside the door. The electronic latch clicked just as the handle dropped fully. The door pushed inward half an inch, caught by the lock, and stopped. For 1 second, neither of us moved. Then something hit the door. Not hard enough to break it, just a single heavy thud, like a shoulder leaning in. I stumbled backward into the desk, knocking over a mug. Cold tea spilled across the surface and dripped onto the floor. I pressed the emergency call button. A silent alarm went to the central station and police. I knew that. I'd been trained on it. But knowing help is coming and feeling safe are two completely different things. The person outside tapped the door. 3 gentle taps. Then they slid something underneath. A photograph. It stopped near my shoe. I looked down. It was me sleeping, taken through my bedroom window. My curtains were partly open in the picture. My face was turned toward the wall. The room was dark except for streetlight. I couldn't move. That photo did something to me that the mask never had. The mask was strange. The voice was terrifying. But that photo was personal in a way that made my skin feel wrong on my body. This person had been outside my home, watching me sleep. I grabbed my phone and called 999 with hands that barely worked. The operator asked what service I needed. I said police. My voice cracked, and I hated that. I sounded like a child. "There's someone inside the museum," I said. "They're outside the security control room. They've been stalking me. They're trying to get in." The operator kept me talking. Asked where I was. Asked if the door was locked. Asked if I could exit another way. There was a second door at the back of the control room, but it opened into a narrow staff passage leading toward storage and the old service stairs. I didn't want to go into a dark corridor. The thought made my whole body reject itself. Then the main door handle stopped moving. Silence. I looked at the corridor camera again. Still empty, but I realized then that the corridor camera was frozen. The timestamp wasn't changing. 3 hours, 4 minutes, and 11 seconds. It had been frozen for minutes. The person outside could be standing right there, and I wouldn't see them. Or they could be somewhere else now. The operator asked, "Can you hear them?" I whispered, "No." That was worse, because then the back door opened. Just a crack. I hadn't locked that one either. My heart dropped so hard I felt sick. A pale hand appeared around the edge of the door and pushed it wider. I remember the exact sound of the hinge. A quiet metal squeal. Ordinary. Almost polite. Then he stepped in. The man in the flat cap. Only he wasn't wearing the cap anymore. He was wearing the mask. Not over his whole head. He had tied it across his face with dark cord, so the old black would sat over his features. The eye holes were empty from where I stood. His body was thin in a dark coat. One gloved hand hung at his side. The other held a ring of keys. Staff keys. I couldn't speak. He tilted his head slightly, like he was studying me. The operator's voice came faintly from my phone on the desk. "Hello? Are you still there?" The man said, "You made them look at me again." His voice was muffled under the mask, but I recognized it from the audio. Human. Not ancient. Not impossible. Somehow that made it worse. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, which was the metal kettle from the counter, and threw it at him. It missed completely. It hit the doorframe and crashed to the floor. That tiny failure almost broke me. I'd imagined, in a situation like this, that adrenaline would turn me into someone brave. It didn't. It made me clumsy. It made my hands useless. It made my thoughts scatter. He moved toward me. Slowly. Not running. That was the worst part. He wasn't panicked. He knew the building. He knew I had nowhere easy to go. I backed around the desk, knocking into the chair. He said, "You should have kept watching quietly." I don't know why that sentence scared me so badly, but it did. Maybe because it sounded rehearsed, like he'd been waiting to say it. I picked up the chair and shoved it between us. He grabbed the back of it. For one horrible second, we both held it, pulling against each other like some stupid, pathetic tug of war in an office. Then the emergency alarm finally sounded. A sharp siren burst through the control room. The man flinched. Not much, but enough. I let go of the chair and ran for the main door. I hit the release button, yanked it open, and sprinted into the corridor without checking the camera, without thinking, without anything except the animal need to get away. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my hands trembling as I fumbled for the keys. Every second felt stretched, like time itself was conspiring against me. I went the wrong way at first. That's the part one still hate remembering. I knew that building. I'd walked it dozens of times, but fear wiped the map from my head. I ran left when I should have gone right and ended up near the staff lift, which was locked down because of the alarm. Behind me, the control room door opened. I heard him step into the corridor. Not running, walking. I turned and saw him under the fluorescent lights, wearing that old black mask, head slightly bowed, like a priest in some awful little ceremony. I ran again. I cut through a staff corridor, shoved through a fire door, and came out near the Roman gallery. The alarm echoed through the whole museum. Red lights flashed in corners. Statues stood in rows, pale and blind. My shoes slipped on the polished floor. I hit my shoulder against a case and nearly fell. Behind me somewhere a door opened. I ducked behind a large stone display and tried to breathe quietly. My phone was still in the control room. My radio was gone. I had no weapon, no plan, just the alarm, just my own breathing. I heard footsteps enter the gallery. Slow, measured. The man wasn't searching like someone who had lost me. He was moving like he knew exactly where I'd go. That's when I understood something that made my stomach twist. This hadn't started with the mask moving. It had started before I ever took the job. He'd known the patrol routes, the blind spots, the locks, the staff exits. He had access to keys. He knew where cameras froze and how long it would take for people to respond. The mask was theater. The museum was his stage. And I was just the person who had noticed. The footsteps came closer. I crouched behind the display, one hand over my mouth, trying not to make any sound. I could see the bottom of his coat through the gap between the plinth and the floor. He stopped maybe 10 feet away. For a second, all I heard was the alarm. Then he whispered, "Elliot." I almost made a sound. The way he said my name was soft, familiar. like we were friends playing hide and seek. Then another voice shouted from far away, "Shaw, Graham." I had never been so relieved to hear another human being in my life. The man in the mask turned his head. I didn't wait. I bolted from behind the display and ran toward Graham's voice. I saw him at the far end of the gallery, holding a torch and what looked like a heavy maintenance bar. He saw me and his face changed. "Run," he shouted. I did. The man behind me finally ran too. That sound still visits me sometimes. Fast footsteps on marble. The mask cords tapping against his coat, his breath coming hard behind the wood. Graham stepped forward and swung the torch beam straight into the man's face. The man veered sideways, slipped, and slammed into a display barrier. Not badly, just enough to slow him. Graham grabbed my coat and pulled me through a staff door. He slammed it shut and locked it with a key. "What the hell is that?" he said. I couldn't answer. We backed away together through the service corridor. Graham kept telling me to keep moving. I remember nodding even though I wasn't really processing words anymore. Behind us, something hit the locked door. Once, twice, then nothing. Police arrived within minutes, though it felt much longer. They entered through the staff entrance, with Graham shouting directions into a phone. More museum security arrived. The building was searched section by section. They found the mask in the Roman gallery, lying on the floor near the display barrier. They did not find the man. At least, not that night. That's the part people always get stuck on when I tell them. How could he disappear from a locked museum? The answer, eventually, was simple and stupid and human. There was an old service tunnel under part of the building, not used for public operations anymore, but still accessible through a maintenance hatch behind storage. Most current staff didn't even know about it, but older contractors did. People who'd worked renovations years before did. People who had copied keys or borrowed access cards at the right time did. The man had gone down through the hatch and out through a connected service route leading toward another building. He knew exactly where to go. They found him 3 days later. Not because of some dramatic manhunt. Because he made a mistake. He used a staff access card that had belonged to a former night technician named Peter Vale, who had been dismissed years earlier after multiple complaints. He'd apparently continued entering restricted areas during public hours, using old knowledge of delivery schedules and side doors. The card should have been deactivated long before. For some reason, it still triggered partial access in one old system that hadn't been fully updated. I don't know every detail of what happened after that. Some of it was kept internal. Some of it became a legal matter. I was told he had worked in building maintenance during an earlier renovation and had developed an obsession with the mask, or with the idea of it. He believed, or claimed to believe, that the object should not be displayed, that it was being watched wrong. Those were the words someone told me. Watched wrong. He had been moving it, recording audio, placing notes, and following me because I was the guard who kept reporting the disturbances. He decided I had seen too much, though what that meant to him, I'll never fully understand. At my flat, police found marks near the communal garden gate and evidence that someone had been standing outside my window more than once. My landlord suddenly became very helpful after the police got involved. Locks were changed. Cameras were installed. Curtains replaced the cheap blinds I'd never bothered to fix. I moved anyway. I couldn't sleep there after seeing that photograph. For weeks, I stayed with my mom. I was 26 years old, sleeping in my childhood bedroom under a shelf of old football trophies and school books, waking up at every car door outside. I'd hear the heating click on and sit upright, convinced someone had stepped into the hallway. I quit the museum job immediately. Graham called me twice after. Anita sent a message that just said, "You did nothing wrong." I stared at that message for a long time because I think part of me needed to hear it. That's another thing nobody tells you. When something like this happens, you blame yourself in little ways. Why didn't I quit earlier? Why didn't I lock the back door? Why did I follow him into the gallery? Why didn't I take the first note more seriously? But fear doesn't come with a script. You don't behave like a character in a thriller. You behave like a tired person trying to make rent, trying not to seem dramatic, trying to convince yourself the world is still normal. It's been years now. I work days. Completely different job. Nothing with patrols, nothing with keys, nothing in old buildings after dark. I still love museums in theory, but I don't visit them alone. If I go, I stay in busy rooms. I don't linger near masks. I don't stand too close to glass cases. Sometimes people ask if I think the mask was cursed. I always say no. Not because I'm certain, because the truth is worse. A cursed object is easy in a way. It means the evil lives in one place. Behind glass, on a plinth, under a spotlight with a little label explaining where it came from. But what happened to me wasn't really about the mask. It was about a man who learned a building so well he could move through it like a thought. A man who understood cameras, keys, blind spots, routines. A man who knew that if he made things strange enough, people would argue about whether they were possible instead of asking who was making them happen. That's what still scares me. Not the old wood face, not the hollow eyes, the planning, the patience, the way he watched from ordinary places, a gallery entrance, a service lane, a street lamp outside work, a garden outside my flat. Even after escaping, even with the safety of the police lights behind me, a small, cold part of me couldn't stop replaying the face I'd seen through the window, the calm, empty eyes that didn't blink. And sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I still think about that audio recording. You looked at me. Now I know your face. I know it was a man's voice. I know there were wires and access cards and keys, and all the boring real-world explanations people need in order to sleep. But knowing that doesn't help much. Because the scariest part was never that something impossible found me in the dark. The scariest part was realizing that something very possible had been standing there the whole time, waiting for me to look. Story 5. Have you ever heard someone you love calling your name from somewhere they shouldn't be? Not in a dream. Not in that half-awake state where your brain makes sounds out of nothing. I mean awake. Sitting upright in bed, phone screen glowing in your hand, the whole flat quiet around you, and then hearing your mom's voice from behind a locked door that absolutely should not exist. That happened to me when I was 17. My name is Daniel. At the time, I lived in London with my mum, in a flat just off Baker Street. Not right on the touristy part where everyone takes photos and blocks the pavement, but close enough that you could hear traffic most of the day and drunk people laughing outside on weekends. We moved there in October, which is probably why I still associate cold rain and wet pavement with what happened. My mum had just taken a temporary job in Manchester. It was supposed to be for 3 months, maybe 4 if the contract got extended. The plan was that I would stay in London because of college. I was in my final year, and she didn't want to pull me out halfway through. So she rented this small flat from a man named Mr. Vale, who owned a few properties around Marylebone. I know what you're thinking. 17, living alone in London, sounds irresponsible. It wasn't exactly like that. My aunt lived 20 minutes away in Camden. My mum called me every night. A neighbor downstairs, Mrs. Pritchard, had my number and my mum's number. The building was secure, with a front door code and cameras in the entrance hall. It was meant to be safe. And honestly, for the first few weeks, it felt boring more than anything else. The flat was on the 3rd floor of a narrow old building that had clearly been split up and renovated several times. The stairs leaned slightly to one side, the radiator pipes made knocking sounds in the walls, and every room had that faint smell old London flats have, like dust, paint, and damp plaster. There was a small living room, a tiny kitchen, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and a hallway that ran between them. At the very end of the hallway, beside the bathroom, there was a locked door. It was painted the same off-white color as the walls, and if you weren't paying attention, you could almost miss it. It didn't have a normal handle, just a small brass keyhole and a round pull. At first, I assumed it was a cupboard, maybe storage, maybe the boiler. On the day we moved in, my mum asked Mr. Vale about it. "Oh, that's nothing," he said, barely looking up from the papers he was signing. "Old service space. Sealed off years ago. You won't need it." My mum tried the pull. It didn't move. "Can we have the key?" she asked. He smiled, but not in a friendly way. More like he'd practiced smiling for tenants. No key anymore. It's not part of the flat. That was the first thing that bothered me, though not enough to say anything. A door in the flat that wasn't part of the flat. It sounded stupid, but adults say weird things when they don't want to explain something. A week later, while my mom was still there helping me settle in, I found the building plan in a folder she'd been given with the tenancy agreement. It showed the flat layout. Bedroom, kitchen, bath, living room, hallway. No locked door, no cupboard, no service space, just a flat wall where the door actually was. I remember showing it to my mom. She frowned and held the paper closer to her face. Old plan maybe, she said. Buildings like this get changed around. Shouldn't it show a cupboard though? She looked down the hallway at the door. Probably not important. That was her way of saying she was too tired to worry. We had spent the whole day carrying boxes up 3 flights of stairs, and by then both of us were running on tea and biscuits. So I let it go. My mum left for Manchester the following Monday. I walked her to Marylebone Station early in the morning, while the sky was still gray. She hugged me too tight, made me promise to lock the door every night, and said, "Don't be brave about stupid things. Call me or your aunt." I laughed and told her I wasn't a child. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, then just kissed my forehead. That night was the first time I slept alone in the flat. I expected to feel weird. I did. The place made sounds I hadn't noticed when my mum was there. The fridge clicked. Pipes tapped behind the walls. Someone downstairs coughed every few minutes. A bus went by outside and shook the window in its frame. Still nothing happened. Not the first night. Not the second. The third night, I was doing coursework at the kitchen table around 11:30. Rain was hitting the window in that soft, steady way that makes everything feel smaller. I had headphones on, but no music playing because I was pretending to concentrate. That's when I heard 3 knocks. Not loud, not dramatic, just knock, knock, knock. I took one earbud out. The flat was silent. I waited. Nothing. I assumed it was pipes, old building, heating, whatever. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, I knew exactly where it came from. The locked door at the end of the hallway. I didn't move at first. I just sat there with my pen in my hand, staring through the kitchen doorway into the hall. The light was on, and the locked door was half in shadow because the bulb above it had always been weaker than the others. I stood up slowly. "Hello," I called. The second I said it, I felt ridiculous. Like I was in a film, doing the one thing everyone watching would call stupid. No answer. I walked to the door and put my ear close, not touching it. For a moment, nothing. Then a voice said very softly, "Hi." I stepped back so fast I hit my shoulder against the bathroom doorframe. It was a woman's voice. Calm, friendly, almost embarrassed. "Hello," I said again, but this time my voice cracked. There was a pause. "I'm sorry," the voice said. "I didn't mean to scare you." My mouth went dry. "Who are you?" Another pause. Then, "I live next door. I think something's wrong with the door." Next door didn't make sense. On that side of the flat was the outside wall of the building. I knew because the bathroom window was there. Beyond it was an alley, and then another building separated by a narrow gap. I told myself maybe the flats were arranged strangely. Maybe there was some storage space between units. Maybe someone had accidentally got locked in. "Are you stuck?" I asked. "I think so," she said. There was something wrong with the way she answered. Not obviously wrong, just delayed, like she had to think about what a normal person would say. I pulled out my phone and called my mom. She picked up after a few rings, sounding sleepy. "What's wrong?" I whispered. "There's someone behind the locked door." She was awake instantly. "What do you mean, someone?" I explained quickly, keeping my eyes on the door the whole time. My mom told me not to open anything, not that I could have, and to call the landlord. Then she stayed on the phone while I called Mr. Vale on the other line. He didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. From behind the door, the woman said, "Can you help me?" My mom heard it through the phone. She went quiet. Then she said, "Daniel, go downstairs to Mrs. Pritchard." Now, I didn't argue. I grabbed my keys, kept the phone to my ear, and walked backwards down the hall. The voice behind the door said, "Please don't leave." That should have made me run, but the way she said it was so normal that my brain tried to soften it. Maybe she really was trapped. Maybe she was scared. Maybe leaving her was cruel. But then she said my name. "Daniel." I froze. My mom heard that too. "Go," she said sharply. Now. I ran. Mrs. Pritchard opened her door in a dressing gown, hair wrapped in a scarf, face annoyed until she saw mine. She let me in, sat me at her kitchen table, and called Mr. Vale herself. He answered her after 2 rings. I could hear her side of the conversation. "Yes, it's Evelyn from flat 2. The boy upstairs says someone is behind that sealed door." "No, I don't think he's making it up." "Well, I heard him say." Then she stopped and looked at me. "He says it's impossible," she told me, covering the phone. "He says there's nothing behind there." My mom was still on my phone. She said, "Tell him we're calling police." Mrs. Pritchard repeated that. Whatever Mr. Vale said made her face change. She hung up. "He's coming over." It took him 25 minutes. I stayed downstairs the whole time, drinking tea I didn't want, while my mom kept asking me questions I couldn't answer. How did it know your name? Was the voice clear? Did it sound young? Did you hear movement? When Mr. Vale arrived, he looked annoyed rather than worried. He was a tall, thin man in his 50s, wearing a black coat over what looked like pajamas. He smelled strongly of aftershave, like he'd sprayed it on in a hurry. He went upstairs with Mrs. Pritchard and me following behind. The flat was exactly how I'd left it. Kitchen light on. Coursework spread out. Hallway quiet. Mr. Vale walked straight to the locked door. "Old building sounds," he said. "I heard a person," I said. He put his ear to the door for maybe 2 seconds. "Nothing." Then he knocked on it lightly. "See? Solid." "It isn't solid," I said. She answered me. His eyes flicked to me. "She? A woman." He sighed, like I was wasting his time. Then he took a ring of keys from his pocket. That was the second thing that stayed with me. He had told my mom there was no key anymore. But that night, at nearly midnight, he had one on his ring. He selected a small dark key, put it into the lock, and turned it. The door opened inward. Behind it was not a cupboard. It was a narrow room. Not even a room, really. More like a strip of space between walls. Maybe 6 feet wide and 10 feet long, with a low ceiling and old wooden floorboards. There was a bare bulb hanging from a wire, but it didn't work when Mr. Vale pulled the string. He shone his phone torch inside. Empty. No woman. No furniture. Nothing except dust, a rolled-up bit of carpet, and a few old paint tins. Mrs. Pritchard muttered, "Good Lord." Mr. Vale turned to me. "Satisfied?" I didn't answer because I was looking at the floor. There were footprints in the dust. Not many. Just a few smudged marks leading from the back wall toward the door. Mr. Vale saw me looking and stepped inside quickly, messing them up with his own shoes. "Maintenance has been in here," he said, "before you moved in. Why isn't it on the plan?" I asked. "Because it's not living space." "Why did you say there was no key?" He turned his torch away from me. I said tenants don't get a key. That was not what he had said, but I didn't argue. I was 17, and he was an adult with a coat and keys and a calm voice. People like that make you question yourself without even trying. He locked the door again and told me not to worry. My mom wanted me to spend the night at Mrs. Pritchard's, and I did. I barely slept on her sofa. Every time the pipes clicked, I opened my eyes. The next morning, everything felt less real. Daylight has a way of making fear look childish. I went upstairs, and the flat looked ordinary. My cereal bowl was still in the sink. My school bag was by the door. A delivery van reversed outside with that annoying beeping sound. I told myself I'd panicked. Maybe the voice came from the flat below through the pipes. Maybe someone in the alley had shouted, and the sound carried. Maybe I'd been tired. That lasted until the next night. At 2:13 a.m., I woke up to knocking. 3 knocks. Same rhythm. Knock. 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 I lay completely still under the duvet, staring at my bedroom door. My phone was charging on the floor beside the bed. I reached down slowly and grabbed it. Then the voice came from the hall. "Daniel." It was the same woman, but clearer now. Like her mouth was right against the other side of the locked door. I didn't answer. "Daniel, are you awake?" I called my mom. No answer. I called again. No answer. Then I remembered she'd told me she had an early shift and would put her phone on silent for a few hours. That little normal detail suddenly felt like a trap. The knocking came again. This time faster. "Knock, knock, knock." "Please," the woman said. "It's cold." I got up and quietly pushed my bedroom door closed, then locked it. The lock was tiny, the kind you could open with a coin, but hearing it click made me feel slightly better. I texted my mom. "Someone is knocking again." Then I texted Mrs. Pritchard. "Are you awake?" No reply. I sat on the bed with my knees pulled up, listening. The voice kept talking. Not constantly. That would have been easier, in a way. Instead, it spoke every few minutes, like it knew silence was worse. "I don't want to hurt anyone. Can you just open it a little? I know you're scared." Then, after a long pause, it said, "Your mom said you'd be kind." That was when I started shaking. Not because of the words exactly, but because my mom had said something like that a lot when I was younger. If I ignored someone on the street asking for change, or got impatient with my cousins, she'd say, "Come on, Dan, you're kind. Don't pretend you're not." Hearing a stranger say it from a locked room in my flat made my skin go cold. I called 999. I told the operator there was someone inside my flat, behind a locked interior door. I know how it sounded. I could hear myself sounding young and scared and unsure. She asked if I was in immediate danger. I said I didn't know. She told me officers would come when available and asked me to stay in a safe room. I stayed in my bedroom until nearly 4 in the morning. By the time 2 officers arrived, the knocking had stopped. They checked the flat. They knocked on the locked door. No answer. They called Mr. Vale, who arrived again, this time looking furious. He opened the door. Empty. One officer shone his torch around. The other looked tired, like he'd been sent to deal with a prank. "There's another way in," I said. "There has to be." Mr. Vale laughed under his breath. "There isn't." The officer asked if there was access through the ceiling or floor. Mr. Vale said no. He said it was a dead service void left over from old renovations. He said sound carried strangely through old buildings. I wanted to scream, but instead I stood there feeling small and stupid in my hoodie while everyone looked into the empty space. The officer was kind, at least. He told me to record it if it happened again and to call if I felt unsafe. Before leaving, he said, "Maybe stay with family for a few nights." That's what my mom wanted too. She begged me over the phone to go to my aunt's. I almost did, but I had mocks that week. My aunt's place was crowded, and her husband smoked inside. I told myself I couldn't keep running from a noise in a wall. Also, and I hate admitting this, I was embarrassed. I didn't want everyone treating me like a little kid afraid of the dark. So I stayed. The next few days were quiet. Nothing knocked. Nothing spoke. Mr. Vale sent an email saying the matter had been looked into, and there was no evidence of intrusion. He also reminded my mom that tampering with sealed areas of the property would breach the tenancy agreement. That annoyed her so much she drove down from Manchester that Friday night. She arrived around 9, exhausted, with a bag over one shoulder and rain in her hair. The first thing she did was hug me, then inspect the locked door like she wanted to fight it. "I don't like this," she said. "I know." She called Mr. Vale and asked for a proper inspection. He said he could arrange one the following week. My mom said, "No, tomorrow." He said Saturday would be difficult. She said, "Then we'll arrange our own." He suddenly found time. The next morning, he came with a man he said was a contractor. The contractor looked at the locked room, tapped the walls, checked the ceiling, and shrugged. "No access," he said. "Just old void space." My mom asked why the door existed. The contractor said, "Could have been a maid's room once, maybe. These buildings have been chopped up 100 times." Mr. Vale looked irritated by that answer. My mom took photos of everything. The door, the lock, the inside, the footprints, though by then there was nothing useful left. She also took a photo of the back wall, where the paint looked newer than the rest. That night, with my mom sleeping on the sofa bed in the living room, I felt safe for the first time all week. Nothing happened. Of course it didn't. My mom stayed until Sunday afternoon. Before she left, she put a strip of clear tape across the locked door and frame. It was almost invisible unless you knew it was there. "If this breaks," she said, "you leave. Straight away." I nodded. She looked me in the eye. "I mean it, Daniel." "I know." After she left, the flat felt emptier than before. That evening, I made pasta, watched videos on my laptop, and tried not to look down the hallway. At 11, I checked the tape. Still intact. At midnight, still intact. At 1, I went to bed. At 3:02 a.m., my mom called me. I answered instantly, heart already racing. "Mom." At first, there was only breathing. Then she said, "Dan?" Her voice sounded strange. "Flat. Sleepy maybe." "What's wrong?" I asked. "Can you open the door?" I sat up. "What?" "Open the door, love." I looked at my bedroom door. It was closed, but beyond it, down the hallway, I heard the faintest sound. Knock. 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 My phone almost slipped out of my hand. "Mom, where are you?" There was a pause. "Outside." "No, you're not." "Daniel," she said, and now her voice sounded exactly like her. Not similar. Not an impression. Her. I forgot my key. My throat tightened. I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at the screen. It said Mum. Her contact photo. Her number. The knocking came again. I whispered, "You're in Manchester." On the phone, my mum said, "Don't be silly. Let me in." From the hallway, behind the locked door, the same voice said at the exact same time, "Let me in." I dropped the phone onto the bed. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe properly. My brain was trying to make the situation fit into something normal, and it couldn't. My mum's voice was coming from the phone and from inside the flat, perfectly in sync, like someone had stretched her through the walls. Then the call ended. I called her back with shaking hands. No answer. I called again. No answer. The voice behind the door said, "Daniel, why won't you help me?" That was the moment I stopped trying to explain it. I got dressed, grabbed my backpack and keys, and moved toward the bedroom door. My plan was to run downstairs to Mrs. Pritchard. Simple. Fast. But when I opened my bedroom door, the hallway light was off. I always left it on. The flat was dark except for the weak blue glow from the router in the living room. I could see the locked door at the end of the hall. The tape my mum had placed across it was hanging loose. Broken. My heart sank into my stomach as the door clicked shut behind me, and I realized I was completely alone. Someone was watching, and I had no way out. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but the whisper of footsteps from the hallway made me freeze, every nerve screaming that I was not imagining this. The footsteps were not behind the locked door. They were in the flat, somewhere ahead of me in the dark. I backed into my bedroom and locked the door again. My fingers felt clumsy and numb. I pushed my desk chair under the handle, though the door opened inward and I knew it wouldn't do much. Then I heard something drag lightly across the hallway floor. A soft scrape, then another. I picked up my phone from the bed and turned the brightness all the way down. My mum had texted, "Call police now." That was not me. I stared at the message. Then another came through. "Don't speak. Leave if you can." I called 999 again. This time I whispered. I said someone was inside my flat. I said they had broken through a locked room. I said I was hiding in my bedroom. The operator kept me on the line. "What can you hear now?" she asked. I listened. Nothing. Then a voice right outside my bedroom door said, "Dan?" My whole body went cold. It was my mum's voice again, but different now. Closer. Warmer. Like she was standing in the hallway with her hand on the door. "Dan, open up. You're scaring me." The operator heard it. I know she did because her tone changed. "Do not open the door," she said. The handle moved. Very slowly. Down then up. Down again. The chair creaked against the wood. I backed away until my legs hit the bed. "Daniel," the voice said, still gentle. "I can hear you breathing." I covered my mouth with my hand. Then it laughed. Not loudly, not like a villain, just a small, breathy laugh. And that was somehow worse than anything else. The voice dropped lower, losing the shape of my mum. It became rougher. Male maybe, or just someone tired of pretending. "You're a polite boy," it said. "I knew you would be." The handle stopped moving. For almost a full minute, there was nothing. Then something slid under the door. A photograph. It landed face up on my bedroom floor. Even in the dark, I knew what it was. Me asleep in my bed, taken from inside my room. I didn't scream. I couldn't. Something in me just shut down. The operator was asking questions, but her voice sounded far away. I crawled to the window, opened it, and looked down. 3 floors. Too high to jump without breaking something badly. The alley below was wet and black, with bins lined against the wall. Across from my window, in the building opposite, one small window had its curtain open. For a second, I thought I saw a face there. Pale. Still. Watching. Then it moved away. The bedroom door shook hard. Once. The chair jumped. I started crying then, quietly and uselessly. I didn't want to. It just happened. I was 17, trying to be grown up, trying to sound calm for the emergency operator, and there was someone outside my door with a photo of me sleeping. The door shook again. A crack appeared near the latch. The operator said police were close. Close meant nothing. Close could be 30 seconds or 5 minutes. In that moment, time stretched so thin it felt like it was tearing. I grabbed the heaviest thing I had, which was a metal desk lamp. I held it with both hands. The voice outside said, "Open it before I break it." I didn't answer. Then, from somewhere below, came the sound of Mrs. Pritchard shouting, "Police! Up here!" The person outside my door went completely silent. Footsteps moved away. Fast. Not toward the front door. Toward the locked room. I heard the sealed door open. Then close. Then nothing. By the time the police came into the flat, the hallway light was on again. My bedroom door was damaged around the latch. The chair was still wedged under the handle. The photograph was still on the floor. The locked room door was shut. The tape was broken. And this time, when officers made Mr. Vale come with the key, the room was not empty. There was a sleeping bag rolled in the corner, a cheap portable speaker, a power bank, a small black bag, several food wrappers, a half-empty bottle of water, and against the back wall, the newer paint my mum had photographed had been scraped away near the floor, revealing a narrow panel. Behind it was a crawl space. It led through the wall into the next building. The police found wires, dust, and scuff marks inside. They said someone small enough could move through it. Not comfortably, not quickly, but enough. The next building had been partially empty for renovation. A few flats were occupied, but the upper floors were being worked on. Someone had been using that space to get into the service void behind my flat, into the room that didn't exist. The worst part was what they found in the black bag. Not weapons. Nothing dramatic like that. Just ordinary things. A notebook with my schedule written in it. The times I left for college. The days I went to Tesco. The nights my mum called. A list of names, my mum, my aunt, Mrs. Pritchard, 2 of my friends. There were printed screenshots from my social media. Photos I'd posted. Photos other people had tagged me in. A picture of my mum from her Facebook profile. There was also a small recorder. On it were clips of my mum's voice. Some were taken from videos she had posted years earlier. Birthday messages. A charity thing from her work. A clip from my cousin's wedding where she was laughing. But some were from phone calls. The police explained that someone had probably been close enough, or had some device placed near the wall, to record pieces of our conversations. Not everything. Just enough. My name. Her tone. Little phrases. The calls from her number were spoofed. That's what they told us later. Not hacked exactly, but faked enough to make my phone display her contact. I still don't fully understand it. I don't want to. They didn't find the person that night. That's the part people hate when I tell this story. They want an arrest, a trial, a name, something to make the fear fit into a box. But there wasn't one. The police searched the renovation site next door. They found signs someone had been sleeping there too. More wrappers, cigarette ends, a cheap phone with no SIM card, wiped clean, a high-vis vest, a contractor badge that turned out to be fake. One of the workers said he'd seen a man hanging around the building a few times, but assumed he was with another crew. Mid-30s maybe, white, average height, dark hair, quiet. That was all. Average height, quiet. That description could be half the city. Mr. Vale tried to act shocked, but my mum went after him harder than I'd ever seen her go after anyone. It turned out he knew about the crawl space. He claimed he thought it had been sealed years ago. Maybe it had been. Maybe someone reopened it. Maybe he was just cheap and careless and didn't want to admit his flat had a hidden access point. We moved out the next day. Actually, we didn't even properly move. My aunt, her husband, 2 police officers, and Mrs. Pritchard helped us grab what mattered. Clothes, documents, my laptop, family photos. Everything else stayed until a removal company collected it later. I never slept there again. For weeks afterward, I couldn't sleep with any door closed unless I checked behind it first. I blocked my bedroom door with a suitcase. I changed my number, deleted social media. My mom stopped posting anything public. Even now, years later, I don't like voice notes. I don't like unknown calls. I don't like hearing someone knock 3 times in a row. And Baker Street is ruined for me. People think of Sherlock Holmes and tourists and red buses and bookshops. I think of that narrow hallway, the weak bulb, the tape hanging broken from the doorframe. I think of my mom's voice saying, "Let me in," from a place she couldn't possibly be. Sometimes I wonder how long he'd been watching before the first knock. Days? Weeks? Did he see us moving in? Did he hear Mr. Vale say I'd be alone most of the time? Did he choose me because I was young, or because I was polite, or because he thought I would open the door if the voice sounded scared enough? That's what still gets me. Not the hidden room, not the crawl space, not even the photograph. It's the patience. Someone sat in the dark behind my wall and learned my life one small detail at a time. My routine, my fears, my mom's voice, the exact words that would make me hesitate. The street looked ordinary, quiet, even comforting, but my gut told me something was off. I'd learned too late that danger often wears a friendly face, or a familiar voice. So if you ever move into a new place and there's a locked door nobody wants to explain, don't let anyone make you feel silly for asking. Don't accept old building sounds when you know what you heard. And if someone calls your name from behind a door that shouldn't open, don't answer. Leave. Call someone. Because sometimes the scariest thing in the dark isn't a ghost. Sometimes it's just a person who has been listening long enough to sound like home. Story 6. You ever see a bus at night and just know something isn't right? Not in a jump scare, obvious way, but in a way that makes your skin crawl. That's how this story starts. I'm telling it because it happened to me. And even now, months later, I can't walk past a red double-decker at midnight without thinking it might be watching. My name's Alex. I was 21 at the time, living in London, working a part-time barista job while finishing my art degree. I had a small flat in Camden, nothing fancy but comfortable. My life was normal, safe. I liked that. Ordinary streets, familiar buses, predictable routines. But that night, the city didn't feel ordinary at all. It was just past midnight. The streets were empty, fog rolling in low over the pavement, making the streetlights look blurry. My friends and I had just left a late showing at the cinema. There were 4 of us, me, Sam, Jess, and Ben. We laughed about nothing as we wandered the streets, trying to make the walk to the nearest tube station feel shorter. That's when we saw it. The bus. A bright, red double-decker, parked at the curb with its lights on, doors open, and no one waiting. No destination displayed on the front. It was strange, yes, but at first we thought it was just the last night service, delayed or rerouted. "Is that the midnight bus?" Sam asked. I shrugged. "Could be. Let's just take it," Free ride, right? We laughed, the kind of casual, nervous laugh people give when they're slightly uncomfortable. None of us noticed anything unusual, yet. The doors closed behind us with that familiar hydraulic hiss, and the bus started moving. The engine hummed low, smooth, normal. But when I looked out the window, the streets outside were empty, completely empty. No streetlights flickering, no late-night pedestrians, no cars passing by. Just darkness and fog. I laughed nervously. It's probably some side street or something. You know, Dieter? Jess didn't respond. She just stared out the window, lips tight, eyes wide. I glanced at her. Her hand was gripping the seat edge, so hard her knuckles were white. "Guys, this doesn't look like Camden anymore," she muttered. I laughed again, trying to shake it off, but my stomach was twisting. The buildings we passed were wrong. Old-fashioned, crumbling facades that I didn't recognize. Windows shuttered, streets lined with cobblestones. London, yes, but not the London I knew. The driver never said a word, not a single sound. Just sat there, hands loosely on the wheel, eyes forward. We tried to ignore it at first. We joked. "Maybe we're in some hidden part of the city," Ben said, trying to lighten the mood. But the more we looked, the more wrong everything felt. Then the bus stopped. At first glance, it looked like a normal street. But when I focused, I realized it was familiar. Too familiar. My heart sank. I knew this street. Not from the city, but from a memory I'd buried. The alleyway behind my childhood home. The place I'd run from after a fight with my older brother when I was 12. I froze. "Alex, isn't this?" Sam trailed off. I couldn't speak. The memory hit me like a fist in the gut. Every brick, every shadow, every cracked pavement slab. The bus had stopped at the exact location of one of my worst memories. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but the whisper of tires over the foggy cobblestones, the soft hum of the engine, made me freeze. Every nerve screamed that I was not imagining this. The bus moved again. Another stop. Another memory. This one hit Jess. Her childhood dog's backyard. The tree where she'd lost her first kitten. Her hands trembled against the seat. Ben and Sam tried to reassure her, but their voices sounded distant, hollow. I realized then that the bus, it wasn't just moving. It was reading us, following memories, pulling us through our own pasts, making us face the things we thought we'd forgotten. I tried the door. I pressed the stop button. Nothing. The bus didn't slow. It didn't stop. The driver didn't glance at me. It was like the vehicle itself had become alive. We didn't speak for a while. Just sat, rigid, staring out the windows. Each stop more unbearable than the last. Each street, each building, each scene from our past. It wasn't random. It was intentional. Calculated. At one point, the bus stopped at a bridge over the Thames. The fog was so thick I couldn't see the river, but I could see reflections, faint, distorted images of us on the water below. For a moment, I thought I saw myself reaching up from the river, mouth open, eyes wide. I blinked. It was gone. The quiet was deafening. Not a word from the driver. Not a sound outside. Only the faint hum of the engine and the soft breathing of my friends. Hours, I think, passed. Or maybe minutes. Time had no meaning. Every stop dragged us deeper into ourselves, into fear we didn't know we were carrying. Finally, Sam whispered, I think it knows what scares us the most." We nodded, too scared to speak. And that's when I realized something else. It wasn't taking us anywhere. It was trapping us, collecting us like specimens, forcing us to relive the parts of ourselves we'd tried to bury. Then came the turning point. The bus slowed very slowly and pulled over onto a street that looked like my university campus. The lights were out, the halls empty. But in the distance, I could see someone standing. Me. My exact self, frozen, staring at the bus. The driver's eyes never moved, but the air, it changed. Thickened, pressed against my chest. I wanted to scream, to jump off the bus, to run into the fog. But my friends were frozen too, eyes wide, trembling. And then the doors opened. A soft hiss. The night air hit us. Cold, damp, unsettlingly quiet. And my double, it smiled. "No," I whispered, shaking. This isn't real. This isn't real. I ran. The others followed. Every step on the cobblestones felt heavy, like the city itself was resisting our escape. Behind us, the bus lurched forward again, engine humming low, driver expressionless. And I swear, in the window I saw it smile. The bus had waited. We didn't stop until the fog broke, until the familiar streets of Camden appeared. The red bus was gone. No sound, no lights, just gone. We called the police the next day, of course. They laughed it off. Probably a prank bus, they said. Someone playing with fog and reflections. But we knew better. We knew exactly what we had seen. Months later, I still dream about it. About the stops, the memories, the driver. I avoid buses after midnight now. Avoid red ones, specifically. And every time I hear that soft hum of an engine in the distance, my heart jumps. People say London is safe at night, that the city is predictable. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it takes you through the streets you thought you'd left behind. Sometimes it shows you things you'd rather forget. And sometimes it waits. For me. For you. For anyone who dares to board. Because that bus doesn't stop. Not for fear. Not for logic. Not for anything at all. It just moves. And it always finds a way to get inside your mind. I don't know what happens to the people it collects. I only know I was lucky. I got off. But even now, months later, I check the windows when I walk home. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see the driver. But I know I will. Someday I know I will. So if you're out in London late at night, and you see a red double-decker, lights on, doors open, no passengers waiting, don't board. Don't even think about it, because once you're on, it doesn't matter where you're going. It will take you, and it will never stop. And you might just see yourself waiting, smiling, at the next stop.